I am a writer in Naruto, Chapter 31. Kakashi's eyelids drooped, looking listless, joking, as long as he agreed to PK with Kai, it would be endless, so he had to find a way to escape. At the moment when he lowered his head and thought about it, Kakashi happened to see that Yusha was staring at him and Kai with a good show look, and his brain circuit turned, and he also had a way. Looking at Kakashi, who had been silent for a while, Kai couldn't hold his breath a little, put his right hand on his body, and asked again, "Kakashi, don't you dare to fight." "Red beans, Yusha, I don't know if I can add one to the task, and the last 3 generations of adults have not sent me a task. I want to go out for an activity. If I am lazy at home, my body will be stiff." Glaring at Izuki, Kakashi said in a discussive tone. Kakashi, as a former member of the Shadow Department and an elite shinobi, almost only accepts the tasks personally assigned by the 3 generations of Hokage, and this time he has been back in the village for a few days, and he has not received instructions from his superiors again, so this lie can be overcome. Hongdu, who got the information, immediately raised his eyebrows, then nodded directly, and said boldly, "Okay, if you have you, I'm worried that I won't be able to take care of Yusha alone." Quote. Immediately after, she looked at Kai again, raised her head and said, "Brother Kai, Kakashi will lend me 2 days first, and I will take Yusha to pick up the task in a while. I guess he won't have time to PK with you." Quote. Hee, how could there be no time? Yusha had already figured out these little tricks in his heart, and it was estimated that Kakashi just wanted to get rid of Kai's dog skin plaster, and when he left the training ground after a while, it was estimated that he would part ways. Kai glanced at Kakashi with a slight loss and said, "Alas, it's a shame that I missed another chance to knock you down." Although he knew that Kai was a man who could almost kick out the Hokage's ending, he was known as Kai Huang. But casually beat Kakashi down, I have to say that the person is really big-faced. Kakashi, who was bent on getting rid of Kai, didn't care, just nodded hurriedly and said to Kai, "It's a pity, I also want to be beaten down by you, wait for next time." Kai, who regards Kakashi as his lifelong rival, is indeed a little disappointed, but he is not the kind of person who will hang his head. Suddenly, he took a step forward, patted his chest, and said seriously, "Red Bean, Yuna, let me participate in this mission too, it's been okay recently." Kai Huang's perseverance in wanting to PK with Kakashi is really extremely resolute. Yusha slandered in his heart, and then looked at Hongdu's embarrassed face, and decided to add fuel to the fire himself. Pulling Hongdu's sleeve, Yusha cleared her throat and said crisply, "Sister Hongdu, let Uncle Kai go with us." The words, "other things," Yusha bit extremely hard, and Hongdu immediately received the signal, and hurriedly nodded at Kai, saying, "Yes, Kai, I'm more relieved to have you going." Kai immediately jumped up excitedly and made a "yes" gesture to the sky. Kakashi looked at the red bean who nodded in agreement with a confused expression, completely missing the tacit understanding between the two of them just now. Originally, he planned to run away after a while, but now he was embarrassed to quit, forget it, rolled his eyes, he was a little desperate. Looking left and right, Lock Lee found that the 5 people here were all going on a mission except for him. He immediately shouted at Kai, "Teacher Kai, take me there, I want to go on a mission too." Kai stopped, saw his apprentice looking up at him with a look of hope, went up directly and rubbed his watermelon head, and said righteously, "No. Your current strength is not good, I am afraid that you will be injured." Quote. "Mr. Kai, I believe in myself and believe in you," Rock Lee said loudly. After the school festival ended yesterday, because Yusha still had to get paid, it was Dingji and Shikamaru who sent her back to the Yamanaka family's residence. Holding the small baggage containing the lunch box, Ino opened the wooden door, took off the clogs, and shouted, "Odo-san, Okazen, I'm back." After saying hello to her father and mother, she walked barefoot in the direction of her room, looking preoccupied. Yamanaka Hai, who was kneeling in the living room drinking tea, glanced at his wife with a confused face, and said innocently, "What's wrong with Ino?" Mrs. Yamanaka also looked worried, put her index finger in the center of her lips, thought for a while, and said, "Let's go and take a sneak look, this child is not usually like this." Quote. After returning to his room, Ino didn't even have time to change his clothes, so he went directly to the soft bed and covered his face. "I'm so abnormal today. Especially when I stayed with the woman named Hongdu all the time, I felt uncomfortable, and then I made a series of jealous looks. The key is that I was also seen by Shikamaru and Ding-si. Yusha is not Sasuke-kun." Ino couldn't help but pound the bed with her fists, her whole face was flushed, and it was as hot as a steam oven. It was so embarrassing that she lay on the bed with some desperate words. The bellflower in his ear spent a day and ended his life, hanging on Ino's hair. Flowers and people wilted at the same time. Ike Yamanaka and his wife, who were stealing outside the door, couldn't help but knock on the door and entered Ino's room and said, "Ino, we're in." The Yamanaka couple who came in saw at a glance that Ino, who was lying on the bed and had nothing to love, quickly got up. His face was as red as an apple. Yamanaka high-touched his head, and said with concern, "Ino, what's wrong with you?" Ino. Mrs. Yamanaka, who was not speaking on the side, saw a hint of clues, and suddenly stretched out her hand to push her husband out, and said to Ino with a smile, "Ino, come on." After speaking, he also helped Ino close the door very kindly. Ino pouted and said, "What? Hey, don't push me, said Yamanaka, who was still struggling to go back, eagerly, "I need to see my baby girl." Chapter 32. Really, Mrs. Yamanaka couldn't help but poke her husband's heart with her slender index finger, and said with some contempt, "Don't you understand? Ino, I guess. It's in love." Quote. What? Yamanaka Haichi looked incredulous, just like eating. Shong. His face became a little worse, and he stammered with a mysterious wife who looked smiling, "Should you? Isn't that supposed to? She just went to a campus festival, how could she be in love? I think he's just interested in that kid from the Uchiha family." Quote. For Yamanaka Haii's stupidity, Mrs. Yamanaka could only roll her eyes and mutter, "I really don't understand the heart of a girl. This morning the girl took 4 lunch boxes, and yours was also taken away, remember?" The corners of his mouth twitched, and after his wife's reminder, the whole person reacted. This morning, when he heard that his daughter was going to bring a boxed lunch with a good, male friend, his heart was almost broken into slag, and tonight was even more uncomfortable. Looking at his wife stiffly, Yamanaka asked in an almost desperate tone, "Madam, is Ino bringing a lunch box for that boy named Yusha today?" Nodding meekly, hiding her long yellow hair behind her ears, Lady Yamanaka recalled, "Yes, it's Yusha. I tell you, Yusha is a..." Without listening carefully to what his wife was saying, Yamanaka turned around stiffly, and walked to the living room a little dejected. He needed a cup of tea to calm down now. In the past 10 years, he has sheltered his little cabbage from the wind and rain, loosened the soil and fertilized, carefully cared for her growth. Mrs. Yamanaka looked at her husband's down and out back, and couldn't help but sigh helplessly with her waist crossed, and muttered, "Really, isn't it normal for the little girl sickened to be very normal? HMPH, if I hadn't taken the initiative at the beginning, where would I?" Alas! Ino heard the sound outside the door getting quieter and quieter, and the whole person breathed a sigh of relief, but the flush on his face did not decrease in the slightest. Just now, her father and mother didn't deliberately lower their voices, so those words also went to her ears, and the whole person seemed to burn, and she was embarrassed. Yes, just sleep. As long as she is asleep, none of this can haunt her thoughts. However, what Ino never expected was, "She's gone." I kept staring at the ceiling with my eyes open, but my face didn't blush anymore after taking a shower, but my cheeks were blurred from the bath, and the quilt was pulled to my face, leaving only a pair of eyes, and I didn't know what I was thinking about in the dark night. Ino, who has slept on time since he was a child, was about to break when the alarm clock rang, and when the alarm clock rang, he went to clean himself up in a daze, and then stared at 2 super big black circles under the gaze of his father and mother and finished breakfast. I went to school. After Ino finished breakfast, he said hello to the 2 of them weakly, and then began to walk towards the fantasy place with his school bag on his back in a daze. "Ino, are you okay?" Mrs. Yamanaka looked at the little girl's listless appearance with some distress, and couldn't help but blurt out, "Or, I'll go to the ninja school to help you ask for leave." Ino turned around, pulled a forced smile at his mother, and said, "No need for occasion, I can do it." Quote. Mrs. Yamanaka was about to say something, but she found that a broad palm suddenly appeared on the back of her hand, and she happened to see her husband shaking her head at herself, and the words changed when she came to her mouth. "Then be careful on the road and come back early." Quote. Hi. Last night, I was thinking about why I became that, why Yusha was so close to that Midori red bean, and what was the relationship between the two. All this haunted her brain, and she really couldn't be interested in it after she hadn't slept all night. Walking on the road, she drooped her head and sighed fiercely, feeling lightheaded and dazed. The Yamanaka clan is the #1 family in the entire Konoha line, so it divides a large area of the village. However, there is a downside that the home is a little far away from the ninja school. And Sakura's house in Haruno is very close to the ninja school, and when she was around the corner, she ran into the lost soul, Ino. The street is not wide, and Ino naturally found Sakura, but he only smiled slightly, and then walked towards the school. If it was normal, she would definitely go up and say a few words, but today she really didn't have the strength. Sakura felt strange, but she didn't think there was anything. The two of them had now become enemies for Sasuke. HMPH, Ino must be pretending to be sick to get Sasuke's attention, so as not to let her succeed. Ninja School, Applied S-Class Classroom. The stepped classroom. Before class, the girls in the Application S class are always chattering around the cold second stunned, fighting for the wind and jealousy. Obviously Sasuke doesn't belong to them. But the girls in the crush are all around him. But the only difference today is that Ino didn't discuss it with this group of girls. If Hinata has been staying in his seat quietly because he has a boy he likes, then Ino, who is usually the most excited, shouldn't be. Ino sat down with his two friends, Dingji and Shikamaru, lying on the table and resting with his eyes closed, intending to take a good break, not caring about other people's eyes at all. Dingsi only cared about eating potato chips, and he looked heartless. Although Shikamaru saw through everything, he didn't comfort Ino because it was too troublesome. In one corner, the yellow-haired fox Naruto Uzumaki stared at Sasuke, who had attracted much attention, with a flash of jealousy in his eyes. After staring for several minutes, he saw that there was no well in the crowd, and he quickly stood up and searched for it, and finally saw the person lying on his stomach. Summoning up his courage, Naruto Uzumaki walked to Ino's desk, knocked on the table a few times, and asked strangely, "Ino, what's wrong with you today?" Ino, who was woken up, opened his eyes and saw that it was Naruto Uzumaki, slammed the table and stood up, slapped his head hard with his fist, and said, "Naruto Uzumaki, you made me sleep." Chapter 33. Oops, you woman, you're really violent. Naruto Uzumaki, who was beaten, covered his head and shouted in pain, and said in a bluff, "Sasuke definitely won't like a girl like you." Rolling his eyes, Ino glared back without showing weakness, and said, "Knowing that I am a violent woman, why don't you hurry up and let me go away? Blocking Miss Ben from sleeping, you are just looking for a beating. Sasuke likes me or not, do you care?" Ino spoke to Naruto, and he was very happy, although he was beaten, but he was not a girl, and he would not hold grudges. Tsunere turned around, happily ran back to his seat, and then sat down with the corners of his mouth raised. Ino, who was already dizzy, naturally didn't have the heart to speculate on Naruto's thoughts. His head sank, his eyes closed, and he also fell down. After dozens of minutes of squinting in Ino, Iruka pushed the door open with a file under his arm. When he saw the group of twittering girls around Sasuke, he didn't frown, he was already she to it. Standing on the podium, putting the lesson plan on the desk, patting the blackboard eraser, coughing lightly, Iruka said, "Everyone, be quiet, it's time for class, please restrain your feelings, okay?" After hearing this, a group of little girls immediately ran back to their seats quietly, and their well-behaved appearance made people really wonder if what happened just now really happened. Shikamaru gently bumped the lying Ino with his elbow and reminded in a low voice, "Iruka-sensei is here, Ino." Quote. After 2 snorts, Ino straightened up, but his eyes drooped as if he couldn't open them. After seeing the class quiet, Iruka breathed a sigh of relief. The children in his class are indeed quite noisy, and he sometimes can't control them because of his good temperament, so he also struggles for the class. Standing on the podium, Iruka first spoke a lot about yesterday's school festival, which was nothing more than a compliment on the success of the event and the good performance of the students. Next, he announced that today was a combat class, and the whole class had gone to the training ground. The task hall of the Hokage building is divided into 3 stalls: D level, C level, B level, and grade, and each task distribution stall has 2 on-duty personnel responsible for registering and issuing tasks. Under normal circumstances, there are fewer and fewer ninjas in front of the stall according to the difficulty of the task. After all, the only one who can take on the B-level task is the upper ninja, and under normal circumstances, you have to form a team. Although the ninjas in Konoha village are the most populous in the entire 5 kingdoms, Kamishinobi is really not the kind of rotten street. As for the S-rank and A-rank missions, they generally involve confidential issues, so they are directly issued by the Konoha Hokage of the past dynasties to the trusted elite shinobi, special shinobi, or dark ministry. Sometimes, Azumo and Zidetsu are on duty here for a day, and there are not necessarily a few people who come. But today, when Midori Izuki came to their stall with Yunatsu, Kakashi, Kai, and Shaoli, and then the woman slapped their table hard, both of them were shocked. Midori Izuki, Kakashi Hachiki, Mate Kai, Yusha, and Rock Lee, these draggers are coming to them to receive the mission, isn't it a joke? Just when the 2 of them were stunned, Red Bean glanced at Azumo and Ziti with a smile, took out a handful of kunai from the ninja bag, licked it gently, and then snapped it on the table again, and said threateningly, "Hurry up, hand over the task with the highest commission here." The corners of Yusha's mouth, who was standing behind Hongdu, twitched, and he couldn't help but raise his hand to cover half of his face. This is too embarrassing, isn't it? Kakashi sensed Yuna's helplessness, and couldn't help but chuckle and said, "No way, Red Beans are this style." In the village, few people would provoke him. Quote. Shrugging his shoulders, Yusha pouted and said, "I can see that Sister Hongdu is really powerful and domineering." Azumo and Ziti naturally didn't dare to provoke the Rakshasa of Red Beans, so they immediately handed over all the tasks at hand to Red Beans and let this ant pick them. But my aunt's appetite is really big. Through the discussion just now, Hongdu already roughly knows Yusha's strength. If he becomes a strange leopard and leopard man, Yusha's strength is probably at the level of Zongnan. Even if you bring Shaoli, plus her and Kakashi, Kai, a small B-class mission is still not in sight. But I didn't think about challenging higher. After all, the 2 of them were really dragging oil bottles. However, after reading all the tasks, the red bean was thrown back into the hands of Azumo and Zidetsu, and he couldn't help frowning and said, "Are you hiding good tasks? Our esteemed Midori-sama, please let us both go." Azumo patted his forehead and said with some bitterness, "That's really all there is, how dare we lie to you?" That's right. Azuki nodded tangledly, and then turned to Kai and Kakashi's eyes. These 2 are elite ninjas, it should be okay to challenge the A-level mission, right? Thinking about her, she smiled and said, "Otherwise, let's go directly to the 3 generations of adults and challenge the A rank, right? The 2 of them are small, they can take care of it more when the time comes, and there will be no accidents. With the 2 of you here, there shouldn't be a problem." Quote. Kakashi shrugged his shoulders and said, "Yes, the tasks of the 3 generations of adults are very rewarding." Quote. Kai touched his reflective hair, revealing 2 large white teeth, and said, "Okay, I don't have a problem." Shaoli clenched his fists, looked at Kai excitedly, and said excitedly, "As long as Teacher Kai is here, I won't be afraid." Kai. Shaoli. Shaoli. Teacher Kai. For the 2 masters and apprentices who hugged each other warmly, Yusha, Kakashi, and Azuki all said that they couldn't bear to look at each other. With no objection from anyone, several people walked directly towards the Hokage's office. The 3 generations of Hokage were dealing with official business and busy grading files, when suddenly there was a knock on the door. He frowned, and said, "Enter." 3 generations of adults. Hongdu's voice came first, and after she pushed the door open, she shouted loudly, "Please arrange an A-level task for us, the more money, the better." Chapter 34. After a pause, the 3 generations of Hokage listened to the sound of some fried hair, and complained in his heart. "Mom, it's might wash red beans." Raising his head, the 3 generations of Hokage crossed their hands on the desk, and said seriously to the excited Red Bean, "I can hear your desire for money from your words. Tell me, you've been strapped for money lately." Compared with the hot red beans, Yusha, Kakashi, Kai and Shaoli are much more stable, and as soon as they pushed the door in, they heard a slightly funny conversation between the 3 generations of very red beans, and they couldn't help but sigh. "Yes, yes," Midori Red Bean also nodded seriously, then half-turned, pointed at the 4 people behind him, and said happily with a grin, "Look, my team of 5. It should be no problem to win an A-level mission, right? I've been short of money to buy 3 color balls recently." Quote. When he said it, the corners of the 3 generations' mouths twitched and they looked at the 4 people who came in a little uncomfortable. Yo Natsu and Shaoli don't talk about it for the time being. Which of these Kakashi and Kai is not a character to take out and pick out 100? Usually a single person goes out of an S-class mission, but just now, it's not a problem, and a 5-person team goes to pick up an A-level mission. With a clear cough, the 3rd Hokage took off the Hokage's hat that had been pressing his neck sore and put it aside, and then said to the Red Bean in a serious voice, "I said Red Bean, it's not appropriate." Quote. What's not appropriate? Azuki looked confused, scratched his head and said, "If you think I'm not good enough to lead the team, you can let Kai or Kakashi be the captain, I just want money now." Quote. Where is this enough to be enough? The 3 generations of Hokage are also crazy in their hearts. This is a reluctant question, okay. Coughing, he adjusted his emotions and explained, "Kakashi and Kai are the pillars of the village, and you, although I haven't assigned you a new mission recently. But the 3 of you go out at the same time to perform A-level missions, isn't it too big to be overused?" Yusha raised her eyebrows. How could she not know what the white-bearded old man meant, the 3 people in their 5-person team? Azuki, Kakashi, and Kai, all of them are in charge of themselves, so they don't want these 3 people to go out together at all. Kakashi naturally knew this as well, so he took a step forward and said, 3 generations of adults, since you think it's not appropriate for the 5 of us to take on A-level tasks, then it's okay to have suitable S-class missions. Quote. Kai also nodded wildly and said, "Even if it's a super S-level mission, it's no problem, people just want to be young and have the courage to challenge." Yusha and Shaoli naturally didn't have the right to speak, but the 2 pairs of eyes looked at the 3 generations of Hokage fixedly. Alexander. In the 5 pairs of eyes, the cheeks of the 3 generations of Hokage hurt and were defeated. Hey, it's really hard to refuse. Take the initiative to ask for a task. If you refuse, it's really inhumane. With a sigh, the 3 generations of Hokage got up, picked up the scroll on the side of the table, and then handed it to Kakashi behind Azuki, and said, "Azuki is not stable enough, Kakashi should lead the team. This is a commission that I just received, although it is an S-level task, but the difficulty is about A-level, it is issued by a wealthy businessman, and the commission is very considerable." Quote. Ah, yes. Kakashi took the scroll, casually glanced at it and put it away, then asked, "What is this mission?" "Help a rich man to find his son." The 3rd Hokage shook his head and said, "You can really do whatever you want if you have money, and here's how it goes." Full of warmth and lust, as the son of a rich man's family, a large part of them like to have nothing to do. Of course, there are also many motivated sons of the landlord's family, but the stupid son of the rich man's family, Tsuruta Yoshihide, who is in trouble this time, belongs to the former. As the son of Genichiro Tsuruta, a famous merchant in the land of fire. He could have grown up peacefully and then waited for death, took over the business of the Saruta family, and reached the pinnacle of life, but who knew that this son was a ninjutsu fanatic? And as a rich father, Genichiro Saruta naturally wanted to satisfy his son's little dream, so he asked someone to spend a lot of money to learn a few ninjutsu in a ninja school, planning to let the good son who hugged his thigh and cried every day take his heart away. However, Saruta Kenichiro really despised Yoshihide's enthusiasm for ninjutsu. No matter which village it is, it's secretive about some high-level ninjutsu, and most of the things that can be taught to this rich second generation are some commonplace small ninjutsu, just like ninja schools will only teach ordinary ninjutsu such as transformation techniques, stand-in techniques, and doppelgangers. A ninja can obtain ninjutsu in 3 ways. The first is to teach it to the family, and some prominent families with rich heritage use this way of teaching, such as the Hikiha clan and the Uchiha clan. The second is to learn from a teacher, and the master-apprentice inheritance is also a very common existence, like Naruto to Jiraiya, and the third is to let the leading teacher teach after graduating from the ninja school. So, as soon as Yoshihide Saruta, who didn't learn anything about ninjutsu, got home, he picked up his father's thigh again, and the crying was a tearjerker, and he hiccuped from crying. But Saruta Kenichiro felt that this was not a problem. No matter how rich the family was, he couldn't force other people to teach secret arts in the village, right? And some of his business had to rely on the ninjas in the ninja village to protect him, so he couldn't afford to offend a ninja village in order to satisfy his son's ninja dream. Saruta Yoshihide saw that it didn't work to splash and roll, so he went back to his house in a fit of anger. But the stupid son is worthy of being the son of the rich man's family, and the private money is called more than one. Therefore, behind his father's back, he began to secretly recruit some ninjas who came out of the small ninja village as guards, and also asked for a lot of money to learn ninjutsu. Facts have proved that this matter can really be hidden from him. Genichiro Saruta felt that his son should also go to find a few guards, and nothing happened to him, so he turned a blind eye and didn't care about this matter. But something happened recently. Saruta Yoshihide recruited a very powerful wandering ninja a while ago, and his strength is still above the ordinary upper ninja, which is very important. The wandering ninja also taught Yoshihide a few powerful ninjutsu, so he won Yoshihide's trust. Then one day, the wandering ninja pretended to be inadvertently revealed to Yoshihide Saruta that he knew of a very powerful psychic beast in a place. When the merchant's son found out, he wanted it very much, and immediately pulled a group of people to arrest him. That's gone forever, gone. Yusha listened to the whole process and was speechless for a while, so the task this time is to find a little kid who has disappeared by playing himself. Chapter 35. Yusha couldn't help but shake his head and tisk twice. If he was the stupid son of the rich man's family, he would stay at home all day long and wait for death, and even naively went to a wandering ninja to teach him ninjutsu. Wandering ninjas, as the name suggests, do not belong to any village. They are just unorthodox ninjas who wander around, and do not belong to any ninja village, traveling between countries. If the ninjas of the ninja village kidnap, blackmail, or outright kill their employers, the village's credibility will be in jeopardy. If this happens, the village will quickly send someone to deal with it in order to save its reputation. And the wandering ninja has no one to help, endorse, which recruits so much, it is a matter of time before something happens. This rich man's father is really relieved of his precious son. Yuna, what are you thinking? Seeing that Kakashi had been appointed captain, Azuki took 2 steps back and stood beside Yuna, and said softly. It's okay, I just think that this person called Saruta Yoshihide would think of hiring a wandering ninja, and it is estimated that it will be sooner or later to get angry. Yusha explained, raised his hand and tugged at the sleeve of the red bean, and asked softly, and this mission won't go for half a month, right? After all, it's an S level. It just so happened that these words fell on the ears of the 3 generations of Hokage, and the old man smiled kindly at Yunatsu, and said directly, Kid, your name is Yusha, right? You don't have to worry, although this mission is S rank, but with Kakashi's presence, it won't take too long. After all, he is the most suitable for the task of finding people. Quote. Damn, he forgot just now, Kakashi is a man with 8 ninja dogs. It's pretty easy to just release a Parker and find someone. He immediately nodded at the 3 generations of Hokage, and said obediently, thank you, 3 generations of old man, you are really a good person. These words attracted the attention of Kakashi, Kai, Azumi and Shaoli, and their eyes were clearly full of disbelief. But this is out of Yusha's mouth, but somehow there is a kind of honey patting the farts feel. After all, Yusha has always given people a very mature, optimistic, and occasionally a little cheap, which is really a very upside-down image. However, the 3 generations of Hokage laughed a few times when they heard, ha ha ha, and glanced at Yusha kindly. Their eyes were full of helplessness, and they seemed to say to themselves, where am I a good person? Well, the fart slapped on the horse's leg. Seeing that no one was talking, the 3 generations of Hokage smiled and said, you can go to the Haruta Izakaya to take a look. Genichiro Saruta hasn't left yet, and he's waiting for news. Quote. There is a hill in the middle of a hill 5 kilometers from Saruta's residence, which is not high but very steep, and there is a very hidden cave in the middle of the mountain. The bonfire in the cave was burning, but it couldn't dispel some of the gloomy and cold, and Saruta Yoshihide was tightly tied into a caterpillar, trembling slightly, and his face was full of tears, but he didn't dare to cry out loud. Beneath him was slimy blood and smelled fishy. However, the blood under Yoshihide Saruta was not his own, but that of his guards. Now, except for him and the man, everyone else is dead. That's nearly 20 people. If it weren't for the rich man's father, he would probably have to burp. The man sitting by the fire was tightly covered all over his body, and only a pair of green eyes could be seen, which looked particularly infiltrating in the cave where the light was not sufficient. On the forehead is the forehead guard of the Taki ninja village. But it's a trace that is hard to get rid of from the middle of the kunai. This wandering ninja is the Taki ninja of the Taki horn capital. Threw a dry branch into the flames, and the horns looked inexplicable. It's a real nuisance. Kakudo muttered. Pain was afraid of exposing the traces of Shao, so he asked to rely on the black market to do tasks to make money, but it was too slow, and he became furious and impatient after doing too many flying segments. Some time ago, the two of them happened to be on the way to collect the bounty to make money, and they heard news that it was the son of the rich man of the fire country, Saruta Yoshihide, who was recruiting some wandering ninjas to learn Shinin Jutsu, so the two of them suddenly moved their minds. Although the 5 major powers are not convinced by each other, to be honest, the country of fire guarded by Konoha village is still a little more powerful than the other 4 countries, so the business of the merchants below is also easy to do, resulting in the country of fire often producing local tyrants. However, Kakudo was not stupid enough to go directly to rob it. After all, if the rich man who was called in the land of fire was robbed, it would definitely attract great attention. Therefore, Kakudo thought of a compromise method, starting with Saruta Yoshihide. In this way, he blackmailed the rich man, and it is estimated that he can also take a break for a while. However, what I didn't expect was that after Kenichiro Saruta found out that his precious son was missing, he immediately rushed to Konoha village, rushed to the Hokage building, and released an S-class mission with a lot of money, which stunned the old man of the 3 generations. Glancing at Saruta Yoshihide who was lying on the ground shivering, Kakudo laughed coldly twice, and said hoarsely, what are you afraid of? As long as your father obediently gives me the ransom, he will let you go immediately. You are the only heir of the Saruta family, and you are afraid that your father will not come to save you. His father will definitely come to save him, but this environment is unbearable. Not to mention, there are more than 20 corpses lying near him. This hole is a Shira field, and a teenage child is not allowed to be afraid. I wasn't scared crazy, I just cried so much that I really had enough face to save face, okay. The Haruta Izakaya is the best inn in Konoha village, and in order to further understand the clues of the mission, the 5-person team ran to the place where Genichiro Saruta was temporarily resting in Konoha, intending to chat with the rich man. Genichiro Saruta lived in a very luxurious large suite, and the few of them originally planned to let Kakashi talk alone, but in the end, the 5 of them knelt down at the coffee table in rows. On the table, there are 6 cups of tea. Alas, you probably know the story, I am such a precious son, and I rely on the third, here belch. 5 places. Genichiro Saruta changed his words instantly when he saw Yusha and Xiaoli looking at him expressionlessly at the same time. Kakashi raised his hand and took a sip of tea, squinting and smiling, naturally, since we accepted your commission. Mr. Saruta. Chapter 36. Genichiro Saruta glanced at Kakashi apologetically, afraid that his retainers were in a hurry, so he immediately shouted, "Come in." The door was pulled with a squeak sound, and I saw a middle-aged man in a kimono handing a panicked kunai and a letter to Saruta. Genichiro, with cold sweat on his forehead and his hands trembling slightly, he said, "Family Master, this letter and kunai were obtained when I was patrolling outside just now." A figure floated by, and before I could react in a hurry, kunai nailed to the plank behind me. Quote. Genichiro Saruta was too rich, and those who had money had to carry the retainers they protected with him, for the safety of their lives and property. As long as you go out to talk about business, you have to bring 3 teams of people to protect you. And this middle-aged retainer who presented the letter to kunai, is definitely a first-class master in his guards. But the middle-aged retainer didn't even notice that someone was secretly staring, and it wasn't until the other party made a move that the middle-aged retainer reacted. If the other party wanted to, it is estimated that he would have died in Wonquan. "Give it to me, give it to me, is there any news of Yoshihide?" Kenichiro Saruta hurriedly went to pick up the letter. When Yusha happened to raise his eyes, he saw the kunai in the hand of the middle-aged retainer, and there were a lot of broken wood chips near the handle, although there were few, but there were indeed them. To be able to insert kunai to the end, either the opponent's strength is strong enough, or the chakra with attributes is attached to the kunai. Like Asma's chakra knife, the wind chakra is infused into it so that it is so sharp that it can easily pierce the stone with a knife. Anyway, since the other party dared to run into Konoha village to deliver the extortion letter with such a swagger, one thing is certain, the other party is definitely a master. The huge Konoha village was quietly invaded, which is really a bit unbelievable. Even if it's Orochimaru, it has to be laid out for a long time, right? Seeing that no one noticed this detail, he pretended to be unintentional and pointed to the kunai in his retainer's hand. Yusha said lightly, and asked a little strangely, "Uncle, did you take a lot of effort to remove that kunai from the wooden door?" The middle-aged retainer, who was so frightened that he was about to lose half his life, was stunned for a moment, then looked at Yusha before he nodded, and said with a wry smile, "That strength, if it weren't for the letter from being broken, I guess I could directly break through the plank, and the other party's strength is far above me. If he wants to kill me, I guess I'm dead." As soon as these words came out, Kakashi, Kai, and Azuki couldn't help but glance at each other, and the situation seemed to be a little unexpected for them. Touching his chin, Hongdu frowned and said, "I'm very suspicious now, the other party is likely to be a gang. One is delivering a letter, and another person is looking at Yoshihide Saruta." Quote. Saying this, Red Bean suddenly got up, patted Yunatsu's shoulder, and said with a gloomy face, "Yuna, you follow Kakashi, I'll go to the Hokage building to report first, this matter is not trivial." Quote. Being able to quietly infiltrate the village in Konoha's guardian barrier, the other party is definitely a dangerous element. Yusha nodded and said, "Sister Azuki, you go, I'll listen to Kakashi-senpai." Quote. After telling Kakashi again, Midori Azuki immediately ran as fast as he could, heading towards the Hokage. And Saruta Genichiro saw that the matter was a little serious just now, so he calmed down and didn't speak. As soon as the Red Bean left, he immediately took out a handkerchief from his pocket, wiped the sweat on his head, and relaxed, and said, it's okay, my son is fine, my son is fine." Quote. After taking the kunai in the hands of the middle-aged retainer, Genichiro Saruta said, "You go and wait outside first, and I'll call you again if there is something later." Quote. Yes, master. After the middle-aged retainer with D. Rene, Genichiro Saruta directly handed all the letters from kunai to Kakashi and said, "Mr. Kakashi, take a look." Quote. Kakashi, who took the letter, glanced at it quickly, then handed it to Yunatsu, who was in a seat away, and returned to Tsuruta in a circle, and everyone understood the situation. Pointing to the letter with a little excitement, Tsuruta Kenichiro said, "The letter means that Yoshihide has been kidnapped, and the kidnappers seem to have come for my money." "Great, great, so that my son will still be alive." Kakashi nodded, and after thinking for a while, he said, "Since the other party is here for money, but whether he directly approached Mr. Tsuruta and instead started from your son, it means that his actions are more or less inconvenient. In this case, until you see the ransom, you will not touch your son." Quote. Kai touched his chin and said, "I think so too. That's good, that's good." Tsuruta Genichiro breathed a long sigh of relief, took out his handkerchief again and wiped the beads of sweat rolling on his forehead, then leaned forward, grabbed Kakashi's right hand tightly, and said sincerely, "Mr. Kakashi, I know who you are." Kakashi. K. Yusha. Xiao Li. Pushing Tsuruta Genichiro with his left hand and was about to squeeze his face, Kakashi said helplessly, "Tsuruta. Mr. Tsuruta, we have something to say. Please let me go first, Mr. Tsuruta." As if he also realized that his actions were inappropriate, Genichiro Tsuruta let go of the hand holding Kakashi with some embarrassment, then coughed, picked up the teacup on the coffee table, and took a small sip. And then the tea in the teacup was gone. Originally, the very elegant act of drinking tea, for some reason, Genichiro Tsuruta did it, and it had a funny magic. Fortunately, the red beans are not here, otherwise they would have started complaining again. As a replica ninja of Konoha village, Kakashi is famous in the 5 major countries, and he has heard a lot about his deeds, so when he saw that the person who took the task was Kakashi, he breathed a sigh of relief. Kakashi used to work as a bodyguard for a small country daimyo, and he had a big business in the country over there, and he was friends with the daimyo, and he talked about Kakashi. Suddenly, Tsuruta Kenichiro stretched out a finger at the 4 of them, and said very seriously, "As long as Mr. Kakashi, you can successfully rescue Yoshihide, then I will give you a separate share of the commission." Yusha's eyelids jumped. What the strange old man said should be the ape flying sun. I have to say that this Genichiro Tsuruta is really rich. Chapter 37. When Kakashi heard that there was enough money, his eyes narrowed slightly, and he said with a smile, "It's easy to say, the 5 of us will definitely do our best to rescue your son." Quote. Tsuruta Kenichiro nodded, thought about it and said, "By the way, since the kidnappers came here for money this time, in order to prevent them from being angry when they can't see the money, I will first prepare cash for you with the money that the kidnappers wanted, and you can carry it to meet the kidnappers. If you can't be tough, don't do it, save trouble. Just ransom me with money, anyway, I'm not short of that money." Quote. The corners of his mouth twitched. Yusha looked at the wealthy Tsuruta Genichiro, and felt that there was no need for him to come to Konoha village to issue an S-level mission, just go and redeem it himself. Sure enough, on the road to spelling for their father, some people are really far ahead of. Just when Yusha was in a trance, he suddenly found that the reward for his last mission, sparring, had been distributed, and it was a crazy diamond. Yusha was happy, but this was not the time to be alone after all, and if the crazy diamond suddenly appeared, it would cause unnecessary trouble. Luckily, Yusha has a control board that allows you to control the distribution of system rewards. After postponing the distribution of the Crazy Diamond Experience Edition, Yusha recovered from the stunned and wanted to serve a teacup and moisten her throat as if in disguise. As soon as the tea was eaten, Yusha suddenly remembered that he hadn't looked at the game map to see if he could take the mission. After all, rescuing Yoshihide Tsuruta should be considered a big task. After opening the map, I found that there was a bright light shining above Tsuruta Kenichiro's head, and the mission had not been triggered yet. It just so happens that you can take this opportunity to take on this task. At this time, Kakashi happened to say to Genichiro Tsuruta, "Don't worry, Mr. Tsuruta, we will definitely do our best to bring your son back." Quote. Yusha hurriedly put down the teacup and said, "Well, Mr. Tsuruta, you can leave it to us with confidence." A child in his teens, even if Yusha is a well-aged person, the voice is really crisp, and it immediately attracted the attention of Genichiro Tsuruta. Thinking that this is the first time to go out on a mission at this age of Yusha, I'm afraid I'm excited. Genichiro Saruta also smiled, nodded and said, then little brother, I'll trouble you. Quote. After Mr. Saruta's words just fell, the system's prompt suddenly came out. Ding dong. Trigger mission. Rescue the son of a rich merchant. Mission description. Yoshihide, the son of the Saruta family, was kidnapped by two mysterious people, and a 5-member team led by Kakashi needed to successfully rescue Yoshihide Saruta from the other party and ensure that he was unscathed. Quote. Reward. 1 Pikachu. When Yusha heard that the reward for the task was a Pikachu, the whole person couldn't help but stiffen, and almost turned from kneeling to lying down. Several people immediately stared at Yusha with an inexplicable expression. Genichiro Saruta touched his fleshy chin and asked a little strangely, little brother, what's wrong with you? Seeing that everyone was staring at him, Yusha immediately shook his head, relaxed his body, lowered his shoulders slightly, and then said, it's okay, I was just stunned just now. Quote. As soon as these words came out, no one stared at Yusha anymore, and turned their heads to continue discussing how to rescue them. The reward for this mission turned out to be a Pikachu. A yellow electric rat immediately appeared in Yusha's mind, pretending to be stupid and cute, shouting, pick up, and pick up. What will others think of a man with a yellow mouse in the future? Fortunately, there are still psychic beasts, this world. This time the detailed discussion also lasted for an hour, and Saruta Genichiro originally planned to follow, but then he forgot it for the sake of safety. When Yunatsu and Kakashi appeared at the door of the izakaya with a suitcase of cash, Midori Izuki rushed back. How's it going? Kakashi asked, holding the suitcase in his hand, to the slightly panting Red Bean. Midori Hongdu waved her hand. Her face was rare and serious, her eyes turned into vertical pupils, and she said in a deep voice, I have reported the invasion of outsiders to the 3 generations, but it seems that the darkness has not found the existence of enemies. Even the enchantment of the village. There was no reaction, either. Kai couldn't help frowning when he heard this, and said, the guards are also negligent in managing the village freely under our noses. If that's the case, do we all 3 want to leave one of us in the village? It's okay, this time it's not for the village. Kakashi shook his head, then said, let's go meet that group of people for a while, and they were able to enter Konoha. Quote. In the dark cave, there is only one bonfire that is not lit, so when Fijuan peels off the branches and leaves that cover the cave, a ray of sunlight comes in from outside, but it is fleeting. Listening to the footsteps, Jiaodu raised his head and said indifferently, you are back, why have you been gone for so long? Hey, threw the bloody 3-knife sickle on the ground casually, sat down on an errand and ran errands, spit out the weeds that had been biting from the corner of his mouth, and said with a smile, this kid's father is not at home, so he wasted his energy and went to Konoha village, which delayed a little time. Quote. Konoha. Itachi's village. Kakudu said with some confusion. Nodding disdainfully, Fei Duan picked up the necklace of the evil god sect, touched it and said, that old man from Genichiro Saruta went to Konoha to issue a mission, and I heard that it is still S level. Shall we stop? Pain doesn't let us directly clash with the people of the 5 villages, which will expose our plans. Quote. HMPH. Kakudo sneered, glanced at Saruta Yoshihide, who was trembling not far away, and said, I don't want it. I finally caught a fat sheep, and I had to cut off 3 catties of meat. It's so annoying to run missions around. Quote. Okay. Fei Duan suddenly got up, a bloodthirsty smile flashed at the corner of his mouth, and he said gloomily, in order not to expose our whereabouts, we can only get rid of all the people who came, just like. That pile of corpses is ordinary, you say. Saruta Yoshihide, who was named, shuddered coldly, and he whispered, that killing so many people is of retribution. Ha ha ha. Retribution. Fei Duan's face suddenly became very hideous. He took a few steps forward, squatted in front of Saruta Yoshihide, lifted the delicate little face that had been contaminated by blood, patted it twice with his hand, and then grinned gloomily twice, and said, do you think people like us will still be afraid of retribution? The evil god will bless us. Chapter 38. With a click, Yusha locked the door, and then turned around and went downstairs. The task of rescuing the son of the Saruta family was not something that could be completed in a day, so after meeting with Azuki at the izakaya, the five of them went home to pack their belongings and made an appointment to meet at the village gate at 4 p.m. In addition to simple daily necessities and money, Yusha didn't bring anything else, so it was relatively quick to pack up. When he arrived at the gate of the village, it was just 4:45, and it was empty except for the two ninjas stationed at the Konoha gate. When Yusha was about to complain about a few people's procrastination, a male voice with a hint of immaturity and excitement suddenly sounded, and when he turned around, he happened to meet a small green plum. Although Yusha really didn't dare to compliment Xiao Li for following Kai's green matching style, she admired the hard work person very much, smiled, beckoned to Xiao Li who ran to her, and said in a friendly manner, "Li Jun. Don't be so polite, just call me Xiao Li." Xiao Li touched his head, and when he smiled, he could see a mouthful of neat big white teeth, which made people feel better in an instant. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Kai and Red Bean both came. The four of them stood in a row, and there seemed to be a line of crows flying over their heads, making a few quack, 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 and quack cries. Yusha raised her head, glanced at the sun that was about to sink in the west, couldn't help but twitch the corners of her mouth, and whispered, "If I'm not mistaken, I set off at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and it's our captain. Kakashi's predecessors." Midori Azuki nodded very calmly, brushed his bangs to the side, and said very chicly, "Normal, if Kakashi arrives on time, it will be abnormal." Quote, "There's nothing to say, although I know that Kakashi must be late for every mission, but it's really heartwarming to let people meet him. Especially, when it was nearly an hour later, Kakashi slowly came out of the door with a copy of Intimacy Heaven. Ah, everyone's here." Kakashi couldn't help but twitch the corners of his mouth when he saw the resentment on the four people, and put away Intimacy Paradise with a shake of his hand, then coughed and said, "Then let's go." Out of Konoha village, there is a dense forest on the periphery, and a river that does not freeze all year round protects the entire village. Because of the late departure, the sunset has already reached the two mountainsides, exuding afterglow. The forests on the outskirts of Konoha village are all decades-old trees, densely blocking the day, and occasionally there are a few whales, which feels eerie. But this gloom does not come from the environment, but from. There are people in the forest who are dense with shadows. Or, there are people with roots. Yusha opened the minimap and took a look. There were several squads patrolling around the road they were walking on, and there was also an enchantment, and the kidnappers could sneak in to deliver the message, which was also amazing. Thinking of this, he suddenly had a bad premonition. It is definitely not an easy task to rescue Saruta Yoshihide. But after thinking about it, there are still two thighs in the team, Kai and Kakashi. Even if there is a shadow-level powerhouse, he will not panic. In a flash, he suddenly found that he was nearly a dozen meters away from Kakashi and Izumi in front of him, and immediately stabilized his mind, and the chakra condensed under his feet increased dramatically, and he rushed forward. Kai slowed down as much as he could, looking at Xiao Li, who was sweating profusely, and couldn't help but show a hint of appreciation in his eyes, but it was not easy for him to keep up with his strength. This is youth and blood. Xiao Li, Kai thought for a moment and showed a row of big white teeth, and said with a smile, "You can actually follow us closely, it seems that the usual training results are good. Teacher Kai, this is all your usual teaching, so that our strength will improve quickly." Xiao Li ran hard, and stretched out a thumbs up to Kai on the right, and said, "I believe that under the guidance of Teacher Kai, I will definitely become an excellent ninja." Kai said very modestly, "You still worked hard." Xiao Li shook his head violently and said, "No, no, no, Teacher Kai is a good teacher for you." Kakashi and Azuki, who were running in front, couldn't help but twitch the corners of their mouths. Xiao Li and Kai's wave of business blowing each other really has a hint of shamelessness. Hongdu couldn't help but turn around, clenched his fists and shook them twice, and shouted loudly, "Kai, take Xiao Li and hurry up. Don't fall behind, we have to hurry up. Quote. Being shouted by the red bean, Kai suddenly remembered, slapped his head violently, and then said to Xiao Li next to him, Xiao Li. Today's practice is over, I'm carrying you on my back. Xiao Li stopped, and then Kai reacted quickly, scooped him on his back, and said loudly, hold on. Now I'm going to have a man-to-man PK with Kakashi to see who can reach the destination first. Hi. Xiao Li became excited when he heard PK, clenched his fists to cheer for Kai, and said, come on, Mr. Kai. Kai carried Xiao Li on his back, and the speed suddenly increased. Coming to Kakashi's side and touching him, Kai said, hey Kakashi, let's see who gets to Takayama Jinya first. After finishing speaking, regardless of Kakashi's reaction, he ran out with Xiao Li on his back, and Yunatsu almost dropped his jaw when he saw the speed, it was too fast. Kakashi-senpai, aren't you going to chase after you? Yunatsu asked Kakashi with some amusement. Regardless of them, let's just go at this pace. Quote. The place of the transaction mentioned in the letter was in a forest more than 100 kilometers north of Konoha village, in the middle of the fire country. Kakashi took Yunatsu, Azuki, Kai, and Lee to the nearest town to the trading point, Takayama Jinya, in more than 3 hours. By the time Kakashi, Azuki, and Yusha arrived at Takayama Jinya, Xiao Li and Kai had already found a hotel and were waiting for the three of them at the entrance of the village. Yusha, who had been on the road for 3 hours, went to his room and took a shower and fell asleep in a hurry. He never tried to mobilize the chakra of his whole body to do his best to travel for 3 hours. The point is, Kakashi, Kai, and Azuki don't have that kind of meaning to be considerate of him at all. Early the next morning, the four of them washed up and prepared to leave, and Xiao Li was left in the hotel to take care of the luggage of the 5 people because of his strength. When the 4 of them were about to leave, Xiao Li also pushed open the window, waved goodbye to the people and said goodbye excitedly. Kai-sensei, Kakashi-senpai, Azumi-senpai, Yusha, I will take good care of the luggage. Chapter 39. When Yusha turned around, she seemed to happen to see the firmness between Xiao Li's eyebrows and the raging fire burning in his eyes, as if it was that sentence. Where the leaves fly, the will of fire is endless. The reason why Konoha village can become the strongest of the 5 ninja villages is reasonable. A young generation like Xiao Li has become the inheritor of the will of fire, why not be afraid of no talent? For the rescue of Tsuruta Yoshihide, Kakashi has made careful arrangements. Yusha and Azuki are in the light, while Kakashi and Kai are in the dark, moving depending on the opportunity. Xiao Yusha, when the other party releases Tsuruta Yoshihide in a while, you see my gestures. Hongdu carefully admonished Yusha, put away the hippie smile, and had a serious face. Yusha hugged the money box that was close to half of him and contained a huge amount of money, nodded seriously, and said, understood. The agreed place in the letter was in a dense forest 3 or 4 kilometers away from the Takayama Jinya, and when Yusha and Hongdu appeared together, Fei Duan yawned, and then jumped down from the tree, put his right hand on his combed-skinned hair and said wildly, what? The huge Konoha village sent an upper ninja and a lower ninja to ransom people. Tisk, Yoshihide Tsuruta, I seriously suspect that your father sent a fake S-class mission. Quote. Tsuruta Yoshihide was very embarrassed and was tied up by a rope the thickness of his index finger, and then hung on the bloody march sickle of the flying section, and his tongue was also plugged by a piece of cloth, and he was constantly struggling, making a whimpering sound, so it was not miserable. When he heard the arrogant voice of the person, and when the Yusha who was waiting for the person to stand still saw the appearance of the person, he couldn't help blurting out the sentence, the groove. The gray big back, the lilac eyes are evil, the forehead guard is worn around the neck like Hinata, and there is a necklace of the cult around the neck, typical white hair, who else can this T-Meow not be in the Xiao organization? If Fei Duan is here, then that corner should also be nearby. How did these 2 people do the job of robbing the house? Midori Red Bean was also taken aback when she suddenly appeared in the flying section, and just now in the distance she noticed the breath of Tsuruta Yoshihide who was constantly struggling, but she didn't perceive the very gentleman-looking person opposite. The other party's strength is above her. At such a time of face-to-face, Midori Red Bean has already understood this fact. The corners of his mouth twitched, and he also held back his temper in the face of the other party's provocation and said, "It's just to redeem people, one upper forbearance and one lower forbearance are enough. Besides, the money we brought, enough sincerity. I just don't know, your sincerity is not enough." Quote. Kakashi and Kai, who were hidden in a big tree, glanced at each other, and their hearts were slightly shocked. Kakashi. The strength of the other party. Kai frowned and asked softly. Quickly lifting his forehead, revealing his riding wheels, Kakashi replied to Kai without squinting, "Unfathomable, it shouldn't be below you and me." Quote. Not below has two meanings. The first is that the strength is on par, and the second is that the strength exceeds that of Kai and Kakashi. Kai was silent for a moment, continuing to stare at the situation below. If you follow Kakashi's words, then this time it was really an S-class mission. Because if Hongdu guessed correctly, this kidnapping case was committed by a team. And the people who are generally in the open are the slightly weaker people. It's like their side, in the bright place are Red Beans and Yusha. Jiaodu stood at the top of a huge banyan tree 50 meters away, staring at Fei Duan and the other two below, and couldn't help but laugh sarcastically. It's too weak, it's really not enough to see. Shaking his head, he originally thought that the S-level mission would come out with a few powerful elite ninjas, but now it seems that one big and one small, one male and one female, are just her. In this way, there is no need for him to make a move, and Fei Duan can solve it alone. Besides, after listening to Hongdu's words, Fijuan immediately turned around and exposed the young master of the Saruta family who was behind him in front of the two. Not afraid of Yusha at all, Hongdu and the two suddenly attacked, and pointed at the person behind him with his right thumb and said, "Tsk, you say that my sincerity is not enough. I brought people over directly." Red Bean. Sighing, Yusha felt the need to hand over the box of money. "I thought it was a rich man who sent a fake S-class mission, but the truth was too real. I thought I was fishing in troubled waters, but it turned out that there were two intermediate bosses all of a sudden. This script is too off track, isn't it? Now, it would be all right to exchange Yoshihide Saruta for him. Anyway, the goal of this mission is just to save people. This money was originally used by Genichiro Saruta to save his son, so there is no pity." Looking at Saruta Yoshihide's trembling body, Hongdu also had a headache, and then said, "Since you are here for money, and you are here to redeem people, then don't say anything. We give money, you give people." Quote. When Fei Duan turned around, a bloodthirsty smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, but he still relented and said, "Cut, I thought there would be a bloody battle. I didn't expect it to be two cowards, so forget it. Come here, pay the money with one hand and hand over the person with the other." Quote. Okay. Red Bean nodded sharply, then stretched out his hand towards Yusha, lowered his voice and said, "Give it to me." Quote. Didn't you say I'll go? Yusha looked at the Red Bean, looking confused. Hongdu gently tapped Yusha's forehead with his index finger, and said with a smile, "I'm not afraid of fraud, don't worry about you Tilda, give it to me quickly, end this task early." Quote. Okay. After hearing this, Yusha immediately understood, knowing that the Red Bean was kind, and immediately handed the money box to her, and couldn't help but raise her head and admonish, "You have to be careful." Quote. Got it, little ghost, you're annoying. When Hongdu took the cardboard box, he made a gesture to fight, and then was dodged. This stage of substitution is quite smooth, and Fei Duan really doesn't want to cause too much trouble. Pen repeatedly stressed the need to keep a low profile, and if he and the horns broke the rules, there would be no good fruit to eat. After redeeming Saruta Yoshihide from Feiden's men, Red Bean first pulled out the cloth in his mouth, then used kunai to cut the rope tied to him, and quickly picked up the person and said to Yusha, who was not far away, "Go." Chapter 40. A huge explosion suddenly came from a small forest not far away. The sudden change made Yusha and Hongdu quickly glance at each other, and their hearts were full of sighs. Judging by the sound, the direction of the explosion was clearly where Kakashi and Kai were hiding. Looking from afar, I saw a puff of white smoke coming out of the entire forest alone, and several giant trees that had fallen down. On the other side, a few minutes ago, Kai and Kakashi stared at the rope on Yoshihide Tsuruta that had been untied by the red beam, and they couldn't help but breathe a long sigh of relief. If it can be solved with money, they don't want to do it. Kai turned to Kakashi and said, "This mission is complete, we can retreat, right?" Kakashi nodded and said, "When Izuki and Yuna take Tsuruta Yoshihide out of this forest, the two of us will break off." Quote. Seeing that Izuki was about to carry Tsuruta Yoshihide, Kakashi was about to put down his forehead guard, but his hands were slammed, his eyes tightened, and he shouted loudly, "Kai, retreat." Although Kai looked confused, out of 100% trust in Kakashi, he also reacted quickly. The two of them evacuated from the original hiding place at the same time, and then ran towards Yunatsu and Izuki. In the middle of the air, there was a burst of, "ha ha ha," laughter, and a large white clay bird kept flapping its wings over the trees. When the horns standing not far away heard the explosion, they looked into the distance and saw two familiar figures, Deidara and the scorpion. He frowned imperceptibly, and when he saw two ninjas in Konoha costumes rushing out of the woods at the place where the explosion occurred, he didn't hide himself, and moved quickly, directly blocking the retreat of Kakashi and the five of them in an instant. "Ha ha ha, do you still want to run?" Deidara laughed maniacally, and then the big white clay bird jumped down and landed firmly to the left of the Kakashi five. On the right, the scorpion also jumped down to make up for it. It's just 3 breaths, and the front and back and left and right have all been blocked, and Kakashi's face instantly became serious. Originally he also came with a paddling mentality. "I didn't expect it, I felt like I was going to capsize." When Yusha heard the explosion, her face was a little unsightly. And the appearance of Deidara and Scorpion made his heart half cold. If it was just Kakuto and Fijuan, if he knew the ninjutsu characteristics of these two people, even if he did it, he still had the confidence to retreat with Tsuruta Yoshihide. But now, there's Deidara and Scorpion, especially Scorpion, whose abilities can be expressed in horror. Yusha said that he had a headache, and he had planned to fish in troubled waters in this world, and it would be okay to follow Uncle Yiel's peace. But now he understands that he is still a traverser in the Hokage world. How can he live in peace and stability? Now, I have to take one step at a time. Of the 5 people, the most desperate is Tsuruta Yoshihide. Yunatsu, Kakashi, Kai, and Izuki have surrounded him back to back when they find that there are enemies all around. Raising his sleeve and wiping the blood stains on his face, Tsuruta Yoshihide said tremblingly, "Do we have a good chance of escaping?" Hondu coughed, quickly put on a posture with kunai in his hand, and said, "The 4 people on the other side don't look easy to mess with, let's try to kill them." Quote. HMPH, Fei Duan flung the bloody scythe to his shoulder, and the chain made a bang sound, and he said with a sneer, "If you want to kill it, you have to see if the scythe in my hand is willing." Quote. Compared to Fei Duan's impatient personality, Kakudu glanced at Deidara and Scorpion very calmly, and asked, "Why are you two here? I remember you on other missions." Quote. Deidara shook the yellow bangs on his forehead and explained, "It's not because you and Fei Duan haven't been regularly reporting to Pain for nearly half a month. This is not the most recent mission in the Fire Country, so I sent the 2 of us over to take a look. I'm afraid you have something out of line. If I don't find you, I found 2 ninjas from Konoha village lying on the tree, and when their hands itched, they threw an explosive clay down, and then they exploded with a bang." Seeing Deidara grinning slightly, Fei Duan snorted coldly, raised his bloody 3 scythes and aimed them at him, and said, "I can't have any problems with Zhao, but you two are really nosy." Quote. "What are you talking about?" Deidara listened, and a word quickly rose on her head, and she was about to spit out the clay with one hand, and threw it in the direction of the flying section with great momentum. It is true that the Shao organization is unanimous with the outside world, but it is also true that this is not pleasing to each other. Everyone is a master, so the temper is also a little worse. Kakudu and Scorpion looked at their partner and couldn't help but speak at the same time. Kakudu. Flying section. Quote. Scorpion. Deidara. Quote. Although the two of them couldn't look at each other, the horns were as vocal as the scorpion, and Fei Duan and Deidara still snorted coldly and chose to give up. The combination of Shao is very interesting, and most of them are two people whose temperaments can complement each other. Fei Duan looked at the 5 people who were surrounded by them, and then said to the scorpion next to him, I'm thinking about whether to kill someone. Anyway, my goal has been achieved. 5 ants, what do you think, big brother Scorpion? Kill, don't leave a single one. Scorpion's somewhat hoarse voice came out, and he took a few steps forward slowly, facing Kakashi's direction, and said, You're Kakashi Hachiki, right? Kakashi held the kunai in his hand and looked at the person lying on the ground, showing only a grimace mask, and the whole person frowned and said, Who are you? The scorpion sneered twice, and said in a dumb voice, My name is Scorpion, you can leave this life today, let me see how the son of Konoha White Fang is capable of. Quote. As soon as the words, Konoha White Fang, came out, Yusha could feel Kakashi's body behind him, and it seemed that his father had a great influence on him. When he saw the scorpion, Yusha knew that today would be a bitter fight. You know, the dearest parent of the scorpion was killed by Kakashi's father, Konoha White Fang, how can you let him go if you meet him today? With a sneer, the scorpion shouted loudly, Deidara, Kakato, and Faden, the remaining 5 people will be handed over to you, Kakashi Hachiki, and I will solve it alone. As soon as the words fell, the scorpion suddenly advanced at a rapid speed, and then stretched out its scorpion tail made of steel from the grimace-shaped hole on its back, stretched out freely, and quickly attacked in the direction of Kakashi. Chapter 41. Knew that the other party was coming for him, and from his observations, the scorpion was undoubtedly the strongest existence of the 4. So Kakashi didn't hesitate, ran away in an instant, and shouted to the people behind him, Protect Tsuruta Yoshihide, I'll lead this away. Quote. HMPH, want to escape. The scorpion's scarlet amber back tail thorn missed, Kai held Tsuruta Yoshihide and quickly flashed to the side, while Yuna and Azuki were also very reactive, and Kakashi ran directly to the east, and the back tail thorn with venom was slammed into the ground with a loud bang. The scorpion, blinded by hatred, laughed maniacally twice, then chased in the direction that Kakashi ran, his hoarse voice floating in the air, Then I'll play with you. Quote. In the blink of an eye, only the 3 of Kakudu, Fijuan, Deidara, and Yusha were left in this clearing. However, the atmosphere is still tense, and it seems that as long as there is a point, the 2 pairs of centaurs will immediately draw their swords and fight each other. Deidara looked at the remaining 4 people and said to the horns with some excitement, How about the 3 of us slaughtering the 3 garbage of Konoha one by one, and then blowing up the Tsuruta or something that has been hiding? Art as an explosion. Listening to Deidara's words, Jiaodu shook his head and said, To deal with a few of them, it doesn't take the 3 of us to attack at the same time. I'll watch from the sidelines, and if it's not right, I'll do it again. Quote. Oh, what's wrong with the situation? Fei Duan was crazy, and before he could make a move with Deidara, he dragged his bloody 3-knife scythe and ran away, and said with a hideous face, Let me sacrifice a few of them to the evil god. Kai decisively put down the Tsuruta Yoshihide who was in his arms, and then rushed directly towards the flying section. On the other side, Fei Duan is a ninja who is as good at physical arts as Kai. Yusha believes that in terms of physical arts, almost no one can be stronger than Maidkai, but in addition to physical arts, the other party is best at spells. As long as blood is not taken, there should be no accidents. Seeing that the horns didn't make a move, only Deidara and Fijuan launched an offensive, and Yusha, who was a little flustered, gradually calmed down. Yusha didn't worry about Kakashi's side at all, he was nicknamed Hagi Gogokai. And as a copy ninja, Kakashi was proficient in all kinds of escape techniques and experienced in 100 battles. With years of combat experience, it is a bit difficult to say that Kakashi is now directly defeating the Scorpion. However, it wasn't that easy for the Scorpion to defeat Kakashi in a one-on-one situation. And the rest of Fei Duan, Kakudu and Deidara, Yusha thinks that the biggest threat is Fei Duan, he is the only one who can kill Kai by spell before Kai opens the 8 gates, but if he tells Fei Duan's ability now, he will only be able to fight Red Beans with a little difficulty in Fei Duan, who is not very powerful in physical skills. In other words, the worst outcome of this battle is that all 4 of them will be confessed here, and their side Kai will die for opening the 8th gate. Thinking of this, Yusha didn't panic at all. No matter how he calculates, his life will be fine. But if he sacrifices Kai directly, it will not be kind. To be honest, he really couldn't do such a thing. Originally, this mission, as long as the ransom was paid, the 5 of them could get out of the way. When they were about to leave just now, Fei Duan didn't stop anyone at all. But after the arrival of Deidara and Scorpion, the form took a sharp turn. However, listening to their conversation just now, Pain originally wanted Deidara and Scorpion to come to find the horn and follow Fijuan, so as not to let the 2 of them cause trouble. But what I didn't expect was that when the enemy met, they were very red-eyed. After the Scorpion saw Kakashi, the son of the enemy, in order to avenge his parents, the Scorpion acted decisively and wanted to put Kakashi to death. Yusha glanced up. Whether it was Fijuan, Kakato, or Deidara, they didn't pay attention to him, Red Bean, and Kai at all. The corners of Yusha's mouth curled slightly, and he suddenly thought of a plan. This time he came to do the task just to paddle to earn some pocket money. There is no need to fight hard like this. It is estimated that someone really has to fold in this forest. Decisively clicked on the system, then opened his control panel, and received the task reward of learning Crazy Diamond. A gust of wind blew, scattering a lot of leaves. In the eyes of the others, Yusha was just stunned. Deidara didn't take Yusha, who looked like a ninja strength, in his eyes at all, but attacked directly at the Red Beans. Ha ha ha, then you're mine. Art is the beauty of an instant, you explode. Deidara saw Fei Duan rush over, and immediately began to throw explosive clay grasshoppers in the direction of the Red Bean. When Red Bean saw the dense detonation clay grasshoppers jumping towards them, his brows furrowed, his hands immediately sealed, and shouted, "How fireball technique!" Before the blasting clay approached them, it had all been burned clean by Red Bean's How fireball technique. Glancing at Yusha, who was still in a daze, Red Bean said decisively, "Yusha, you protect Tsuruta Yoshihide." Okay. Yusha seemed to finally come to his senses. He nodded in response, and then pulled Tsuruta Yoshihide, who was already frozen, to his side, to make sure he wouldn't be affected. In order to prevent Deidara's detonation clay from hurting Yusha and Tsuruta Yoshihide, Azuki immediately launched an attack on Deidara, and at the same time fought and retreated, quickly pulling the opponent out of the range of Yusha and Tsuruta. Seeing this, Yusha was moved, and she couldn't wait to make a promise, but she didn't know if the Red Bean would agree. In the face of the continuous attack of the Red Beans, all kinds of snakes waved and rushed towards Deidara, sneered, made the clay that had just protruded out of it out like a centipede, and shouted, "Detonate the clay centipede." The 2 centipede-like clay quickly wound towards the 2 giant snakes summoned by the Red Bean, and Deidara took advantage of this gap to summon the detonating clay giant bird, jumped up, and hovered in midair. The index finger and middle finger of his right hand were raised side by side, and Deidara's eyes widened, and he shouted impatiently at the Red Bean on the ground, "Your ninjutsu is a fight with Orochimaru, it's disgusting." When the drink came out, the detonating clay centipede exploded instantly, and even the 2 giant snakes summoned by the Red Bean with the ninjutsu, Fierce Snake Ravage, were also blown to pieces. Damn! Hongdu bit the tender meat in his mouth a little fiercely, and his eyes turned into vertical pupils, staring at Deidara in midair very fiercely, and attacked again. Chapter 42. At the same time that Hongdu and Deidara are inseparable, the battle between Fijuan and Kai has also entered a white-hot one. Just now in the process of the 2 people's struggle, Kai has a general understanding of the opponent's strength, and the opponent is not enough to see in terms of physical skills. Seeing that the Red Beans on the other side had already fought, Kai was not at ease and wanted to end it quickly. As soon as this thought moved, he immediately surged the chakra in his body and shouted, 8 doors Dunjia Technique Duman, open. In an instant, Kai's body was covered with chakra lines, and the strength in his body increased dozens of times. Kai saw the opportunity, clenched his fist to concentrate the chakra, and then hit Fijuan's chest hard. After Fijuan saw Kai's movements, the corners of his mouth twitched. He didn't dodge, he didn't even make a block move, and let Kai's fist pierce his heart fiercely. Ha ha ha. Fei Duan's face suddenly flowed a bloodstain, but a crazy smile appeared on his face. Even if he was pierced through the heart, he still looked unscathed. If it weren't for Kai's glance at Deidara's heart, which was indeed pierced by his own fist, he would even suspect that his punch had missed. Suddenly, he realized that something was wrong. This was luring the enemy to go deeper. No wonder he opened the door just now. Kai reacted and immediately stepped back, but it was still a step too late. With a wave of his hand, Deidara slashed a bloody scythe through Kai's face, and blood stained the scythe. When Fei Duan saw Kai's blood stained on the Bloody March scythe, there was a hint of excitement in his eyes. Sticking out his tongue, he gently licked the blood, causing it to flow into his body. In that instant, Fei Duan's physical class was miraculously healed. He used Kai's blood to draw a formation of circles and triangles on the ground, and then found the formation. Ha 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 sneered a few times. Fei Duan's whole body turned black and produced white lines in the spell state, and when he raised his head again, he stared at Kai gloomily, and he said, everything is going to end. Quote. A scream came from the direction of Maidkai and immediately attracted everyone's attention. Kakudu's eyes couldn't help but narrow, looking at the direction of Fei Duan and Kai. The face under the hidden mask was slightly raised. He knew that Fei Duan's cult ritual had been completed. Fei Duan held a pitch-black spear in his left hand and stabbed it into his stomach, and that place was probably where the liver was. And Maidkai knelt on his legs, holding his stomach and kneeling weakly, his head covered with cold sweat, as if he had been stabbed with a pitch-black spear just now. Kai. When he heard the scream, Hongdu was distracted and shouted loudly in Kai's direction. Standing in midair, Deidara laughed twice, quickly spit out the large lump of clay from his mouth, and then shouted, "C2 dragon." I saw a dragon-like clay falling from the sky, and then the moment it was about to touch the ground, it exploded. Fei Duan smiled. Didn't avoid it, he was immortal anyway. Kai was unable to escape because of his internal organs, and his whole body was blown up very badly. Even if it's a red bean, an arm was blown off. Kai. Red bean. Kakashi, who was fighting with the scorpion, heard two screams, and when he heard two screams, he was about to retreat back, planning to go back to support. The scorpion sneered and shouted, "Scarlet Amber prosthetic hand 1,000 books." The cannon fired from Scarlet Amber's left arm device was filled with cylinders containing more than a dozen poison needles. After the scorpion drank it, the mechanism fired, and the cylinders on the cannon flew in all directions. The poisonous needles in the cylinder shot at Kakashi as if they didn't want money, blocking his way. "Kakashi, your opponent is me. Today, don't try to escape from the palm of my hand." Quote. In the open space, in this instant, on their side, except for Yunatsu, there was only one Tsuruta Yoshihide left. "Tsuruta, stand behind me." Yusha paused, stabilized his mind and said, "It's not a big problem, it's still under his control." After waiting for a while, Yusha suddenly found that no one responded to him, and hurriedly looked back, only to find that Tsuruta Yoshihide had already run nearly dozens of meters by himself in a trembling manner. "Escape. I'm going to escape." Tsuruta Yoshihide mobilized the faint chakra on his body, overcoming his fear with all his might, while hurrying to escape. The tragic situation of Hongdu and Kai just now gave him a huge shock. Even if it's a shinobi, he can't save him. Want to run? Deidara also noticed Tsuruta Yoshihide's move, curled the corners of his lips and smiled, and then casually threw a detonating clay Asuka at him. When Asuka approached Yoshihide Tsuruta, Deidara shouted without hesitation, "Drink." With a loud bang, Tsuruta Yoshihide's body was torn apart in a small explosion. He didn't even have a chance to scream. It's too weak, so weak that it doesn't have the slightest power to resist. Tsuruta Yoshihide hadn't reacted yet, and looked at the scattered pieces not far away in confusion. "Isn't that my body?" Yusha stood motionless, looking like she was stupid. Hongdu half knelt on the ground, looking at Yusha's appearance. He couldn't help but grit his teeth and shouted loudly, "Yusha, run!" However, he did not react at all, and just stood there dumbfounded, motionless. "Ha ha ha, you're the only one left." Suddenly, Fei Duan ran in front of Yusha and said with a hideous face, "Next, let me send you to hell." Fei Duan raised the bloody 3 scythes and was about to slash at Yusha. But when the scythe was about to touch Yusha, he saw Yusha's eyes, and he didn't panic at all, and didn't pay attention to him at all. Crazy Diamond became an energy double behind him, nearly 2 meters tall. Yusha raised his head, looked at the black and white, disgusting flying segment, smiled, and sighed. "Isn't it good to take the ransom and stop it? Why do you have to provoke me?" Fei Duan saw that there was a humanoid creature more than 2 meters tall floating behind Yusha at some point, and suddenly felt bad, but relying on his immortal body, Fei Duan didn't retreat. He didn't think that this shinobi in front of him could crack this trick. Bluffing little ghost. Quote. Tut la tut tut to to toot toot. But the next moment, with the strange scream in Yusha's mouth, the attack of the stand-in fell like raindrops, and the power was so great that it directly knocked the flying section into the soil. "What the hell is this humanoid? It's more powerful and faster than me." For a moment, the beaten flying section didn't even realize that he had become one with the earth. Before everyone had time to react, Yusha came to Saruta Yoshihide in an instant, and at this time his head had not fallen to the ground, and his stand-in, Crazy Diamond, hit him in Kai's direction with another toot. Chapter 43. A terrifying picture appeared. The fragments of Yoshihide's body that were torn apart flew in the direction of the head. It's as weird as if you've been pulled along. You know, when a person's body splits, even the best medical ninja can't reorganize it. Yusha suddenly exerted force at his feet, and before Saruta Yoshihide could fly to Kai's side, he was already standing by Kai's side. Crazy Diamond shouted, "Aura," for Gao Gao, and then punched Kai, who was lying on the ground and was unable to get up. In the end, Yusha decisively came to Midori Azuki's side, and gently put her hand on the severed arm that was gushing blood, helping her recover her bloody arm. The severed arm that was blown off on the ground, at the same time as Yusha took his hand, immediately flew up, and then tightly connected to the wound of the red bean, just like Saruta Yoshihide just now. All of this happened in a matter of seconds. Because of inertia, Saruta Yoshihide slammed down on Kai's body with a bang. The whole body is completely clean, and there is not the slightest trace of injury. And after Kai saw Yusha standing beside him, he saw an energy body swing a punch at him, and then a wave of heat started from the lower abdomen and spread throughout the entire body, and the huge pain-like penetration in the stomach was completely gone. It's just that there is a Saruta Yoshihide lying on his body, which is a little heavy. "Sister Hongdu, are you all right?" asked Yusha as she gently rubbed her reborn arm. Hongdu, who was shocked, felt the presence of his arm, and stammered a little, I'm fine, Yuna, you're." Helping the red bean to stand up, Yusha knew her doubts, but she didn't rush to explain anything. Now is not the time. On the other side, Kakashi finally found a gap, escaped from the scorpion sniping, and rushed back to Yuna, Kai, and Azuki. Looking at the few people who were intact, he was stunned and said, "What's the matter? I saw that you were all injured just now. How is it the other way around?" Both Abona and Kai shook their heads, and they also showed puzzled expressions. Kai said, "It's Yusha." Quote. Moving his gaze to Yunatsu's body, Kakashi was surprised. "I didn't know what was happening, but now was not the time to speak." The scorpion had returned, staring at them with fierce eyes. "What's going on?" Deidara jumped down from the detonating clay Asuka and jumped to the side of the scorpion, her face no longer giggling, and whispered to the scorpion, "Those 2 Konoha shinobi just now were obviously half dead by me and Faden, but I didn't expect it to become like this. Big brother Scorpion, can you tell that kid's door?" "I don't know." The scorpion shook his head, then looked up at Yusha and said, "Who are you? At such a young age, you still have the ability to live the dead and give birth to white bones." Yusha pursed his lips and smiled very poorly. He didn't intend to answer the scorpion's question at all. He touched his chin and considered for a while and then said pretending to be pensive, "Your Excellency, it should be a human puppet, and the body is hidden inside, right?" Human puppet. Hongdu, who was standing beside Yusha, touched his head in confusion and asked with some confusion, "What is that?" The so-called human puppet technique is an extremely high-level puppet technique, and it is even better than the forbidden technique. By making a puppet from a person's corpse, you can keep that person's chakra and use their ninjutsu. It's made by a living person who once had a life. And it's made with his pre-life chakra, so it can completely retain all the ninjutsu of this person's life. Quote. Yusha talked one after another, staring at the scorpion's body, then moved his fingers and spoke again. This kind of human puppet technique, the person who can master it is definitely not more than the number of 5 fingers. As far as I know, there are only Chio mother-in-law and Mr. Ebizo from Cheyenne village. However, now is the era of peace, and it should not be those 2 seniors who will do it. After all, directly attacking the ninjas of Konoha village is equivalent to provoking a war between the 2 ninja villages. So, that's the scorpion? Kakashi asked with some confusion. After all, the other party had just done it because of himself, and he didn't remember knowing such a person. Looking up at the scorpion again, Yunatsu touched his chin and said, "I think he and Kakashi-senpai seem to have a blood feud, if I'm not mistaken. It should be the legendary genius puppeteer Akasan Scorpion who betrayed the Sand-Hidden village, whose parents were killed by Konoha White Fang in the Great Ninja War, which is Kakashi's father." Quote. After hearing this, Kakashi showed a look of surprise, and said that he didn't know him at all. It turned out to be a blood feud from the previous generation. Cut. Deidara gritted her teeth secretly, pushed her elbow against the heavy scarlet amber of the scorpion, and whispered, "Who is this person?" The scorpion, which had been silent for a long time, opened his mouth in a hoarse throat and said, "I don't know, this person's observation is careful, and the intelligence work should be good." Quote. I don't believe it, it must have been a mistake. What does a teenage kid know? Deidara was hot, raised his finger at Yusha, and shouted viciously, "Then tell me who I am. Ha ha ha, I can't tell. I'll blow you up." The corners of his mouth twitched. This Deidara is really underpumping, and when he has the opportunity, he must be yin. Taking a deep breath, Yusha spoke again, and said, tentatively, "I once heard that the 3rd generation of Tsuchikage Onoki has a lover, named Deidara, who is good at making a ninjutsu that uses explosive clay, and was forced to leave the village to live because he often caused terrorist incidents, and suddenly disappeared when he was 12 years old. I don't know if it's you." Damn, am I so famous? Deidara couldn't help but be rude. He didn't expect to really let the other party say it. Obviously he has been as low-key as possible in the past few years. The scorpion hidden in the scarlet amber couldn't help frowning, disgusted his partner very much, and said, "Idiot." Now that he had poked out the details of the other 2, Yusha also went on. He looked at the huge pit not far away, and said, "As for the person who held the 3-sword sickle just now, there are 2 abilities that he just showed. One is immortal, and the other is supposed to be a spell. As long as it consumes the opponent's blood and then damages itself, the subject will receive all the damage suffered by the caster." Quote. Such an unbelievable ability. I think about it, there is only one person who can be right. It is rumored that a few years ago, a new religion, Cult of the Evil God, appeared in the village of Ninja, and they secretly conducted a series of experiments on curse abilities and immortality, and you must be the survivor of that experiment. Chapter 44. At the end of the day, when the wind passed through this small battlefield, there was a little wind and sand, and there was a sense of slaughter in the west wind, and the tension between the 2 sides was very tight. As for you, Yusha turned his gaze to Kakato, who was wrapped around his chest and his arms, feigning a hint of hesitation before he said, "Although you have never made a move, it is difficult to guess. However, when I was wandering around the world, I heard about the underground black market. There is a renegade in the village of Takashinobi who is wrapped all over his body and only shows a pair of green eyes, and he often goes to the black market to take on some high-level tasks, so I don't know if it's you, Mr. Kakato." Jiaodu raised his eyebrows and didn't speak, which was a tacit acquiescence. Yusha hooked the corners of his lips and continued to speak. It seems that I guessed correctly, you are the Kakudu of the Taki Ninja Village. As the elite of the Taki Ninja Village, you accepted the mission sent by the top to assassinate the first Hokage, and failed. Returning to the village awaits you with charges and heavy penalties for failing the mission, so you hold a grudge and kill all the top leaders of the Takashi Ninja Village at the time. What kind of ninjutsu is this? Why haven't I heard of it? Yusha glanced up at Red Bean's somewhat puzzled expression and explained, the secret technique, Earth Resentment, can use chakra to manipulate the black tentacles released in the body to seize the hearts of others. Including one's own heart, the body can store up to 5 hearts, and by replacing the heart to prolong life, he is called a person who lives with heaven and earth. Each heart can be transformed into a black-bodied monster formed by ground resentment, and its monster can use the spell of the original heart's owner. Quote, the green eyes became a little deeper, and the horns listened to the explanation, and the whole person's face was really a little ugly. In addition, he was shocked. You know, no one should know the secret of the resentment. After all, the people who knew the secret of this technique at that time had already been solved by him. There may be people in the current Takashi village who have heard of this person's ninjutsu, but they shouldn't know much about the ability to resent. Even the members of Shao only know that he has an immortal body, and now it's okay, everyone present knows it. When Kakato was puzzled, Yusha opened his mouth very forcefully, and he said, the fact that the Taki Ninja Village was able to send him to assassinate the first Hokage, the Thousand Hands Pillar, shows that his strength is unfathomable, and it is estimated that he has at least shadow-level strength after so many years. The reason why the Takashi Ninja Village was only able to be assigned the 7 tails and became the only one outside the 5 ninja villages to have a tailed beast is said to be because of him. Hearing this, Jiaodu nodded in agreement, and unconsciously straightened his waist. It turned out that he was so awesome in the eyes of others. I have to admit that even if the information is exposed, there is an inexplicable sense of vanity in my heart, and he is a little fluttering, which is very useful. Seeing that Jiaodu was still nodding solemnly, the corners of Yusha's mouth twitched, and after scolding shamelessly, he raised his fist in the direction of Jiaodu, then stretched it out, and said with a smile, if you break all 5 of your hearts, I don't know if you can have a 6. It doesn't matter at all. Kakato, get me out quickly. As Yusha's voice fell, the sound of Fijuan's screams came from the huge pit, and he shouted in a panic, I can't get out. Fei Duan's scream immediately attracted the attention of Kakudu, Deidara, and Scorpion, who wanted to see what was happening. At the right time, the energy body behind Yusha rushed at Fijuan's punch, directly smashing the person into a pit, stirring up a thick layer of dust, and there was no dust just now. They were attracted by Yusha's words, so they didn't notice Fijuan's situation. I saw that Fei Duan's body had returned to its original appearance, and since he stepped out of the formation without authorization, the spell in Death Division had been lifted by blood. However, this is a bit distorted, and it is really not flattering. Aha! Deidara laughed wildly with one hand on her stomach and the other on Fijuan, and said breathlessly, why did you follow Chong to the ground? Ha ha ha. What are you laughing at? Fei Duanqi's face was almost green, and he clenched his fists and struggled to get out, but half of his body melted into the soil, and finally he couldn't move and pant after unloading. All this shocked the horns and scorpions. No one expected that the energy body behind Yusha just now seemed to be just an empty punch with power, and it actually came with this special ability. Is it a secret technique or a blood inheritance? And compared to Kakashi, Azuki, and Kai's shock, the 4 people on Shao's side are a little related. Yusha's words just now can be said to have freed up all the 4 people's family resources. Yusha's was able to rely on some of their appearance characteristics and ninjutsu to understand all of them, which shows that his intelligence gathering ability will not be worse than their Shao organization. Even within the Shao organization, the understanding between teammates is not so deep. Even Deidara didn't know that Fei Duan's immortal ability was obtained by relying on the cult of the evil god, and he only thought that Fei Duan was a feudal superstitious psychopath. Similarly, Fei Duan didn't know what Kakuto had experienced, and the ninjutsu of Ji resentment, and he didn't know that Deidara was the apprentice of the third generation of Tsuchikage Daidoki. Nowadays, no one dares to regard Yusha as an ordinary ninja imp. Deidara thought about it carefully, but she couldn't laugh anymore. He turned around suddenly, clenched his fists, stared at Yusha and said fiercely, "You must kill them, otherwise, the identities and abilities of the four of us will all be exposed." "That's right, hurry up and do some of them." Fei Duan, who fused with the soil, cried in, "5 of them, don't let one go. I really can't stand this kind of anger. It's embarrassing, though." After Deidara and Fijuan finished speaking very arrogantly, Kakuto still stood very calmly on the ground, and the scorpion also had no intention of making a move, just the big tail of the scarlet amber, which kept shaking. Deidara said a little angrily, "Big brother scorpion, Jiaodu, do it." At this time, Yusha's painting style changed, and suddenly said, "Everyone came out just to ask for money, why fight and kill to fight for your life, right?" After listening to this, Kakuto looked approving. Originally, he discussed with Fei Duan to retreat after taking the money, and even during the time when he captured Tsuruta Yoshihide, he didn't touch a single cold hair of that kid, wasn't it just for money, and didn't let things get big. If it weren't for the fact that after the scorpion and Deidara came, he directly started with the silver-haired ninja on the other side, he was probably already secretly counting the money at this time, so why bother to be in a dilemma now? There is another reason why Kakuto agrees with Yunatsu's words. The blow he gave just now really had a great impact. Although the strength of the flying section mainly relied on the curse and the immortal body, and the physical skills were relatively weak, the level of ordinary forbearance was still there. However, just now, Yusha won with one blow. The people in their Shao organization were hardly easy to mess with, but Yusha didn't show the slightest timidity. The most terrifying thing is the special function of Yusha's living dead and living bones, which is too weird. All of this means that the other party is a hard stubble. If the other party is very weak, he doesn't even blink his eyes, and he goes up and solves it. But now it seems that if you go head to head with each other, even if you can win, you have to fold 1 or 2 people here, which is not worth it at all. Moreover, it is the scorpion that obviously has an enmity with the other party, although the two are members of the Shao. At the same time, they don't have much intersection, and they don't have the kind of mind to stand out for others. In this way, the horns retreated, and glanced at the scorpion, the meaning was unclear. After glancing at Kakuto, who had obviously retreated, Yusha turned to the scorpion on the side and said, "Scorpion Senior, I think you should know that your parents were born during the war years. Either you die or I live, and it was Konoha White Fang who did it, not Kakashi. Why should you be entangled in this?" After listening to Fijuan on the ground, he suddenly shouted loudly, "Don't listen to his nonsense from Scorpion and Horn, hurry up and kill them for me." Shut up." Yusha directly interrupted the flying section with some impatience and slammed back, "You are a defeated man, don't speak." However, he couldn't speak, just now he was really in a 1-1 situation, he was killed in seconds, and when he thought of this flying section, he was about to explode. Where did he suffer this kind of grievance? Deidara, who has a more impatient temperament, began to mouth cannon after Fei Duan. "Shut up. Don't be too arrogant, you kid. Be careful that I blow you up to powder." With a sneer, Yusha raised his chin and said disdainfully, "As the saying goes, there is a sky outside the sky, and there are people outside the world. Don't make a big fuss here at a young age because you know 2 secret techniques. If it weren't for the protection target here, it would be too troublesome to fight. I would have started killing a long time ago, and whether you can stand now is a question." Quote. That arrogant look, the red beans can't stand it anymore. Deidara blew up at one point and said frantically, "You say it again." Shrugging his shoulders, Yusha said indifferently, "Come on, if you are not convinced, you can go it alone, I will let you have an arm, do you think it is feasible?" As he spoke, he put his left hand behind his back and glanced at Deidara defiantly. At the same time, he released a super small shadow clone technique and secretly communicated with Azuki, Kai, and Kakashi. Ahem. If Deidara really rushes up in a while, I hope you can ignore any righteous anger in the rivers and lakes, and just release a special move, and we will beat him. This secret poking sentence, the three of them were a little speechless after listening to it. The corners of Hongdu's mouth twitched. I didn't expect there to be such a brazen person, and a second ago he said that he wanted to fight with someone alone, and he wanted to fight later. Kakashi couldn't help but touch his forehead and sighed, and even Kai coughed. Provoked by the opponent with one hand, Deidara was like a battle, and he was on fire, and he was about to rush forward with both feet. At this moment, his shoulder was held down by the scorpion, and he said in a deep voice, "Let's go." Chapter 45. That day, after Red Bean and Momoko finally finalized the manuscript fee and payment method for Konoha Love Story, the night was already dark, and she left in a hurry. Momoko was left alone in the office again, deserted. After finishing all the work at hand, I leaned back in my chair and relaxed, and picked up the manuscript again. After reading it carefully, Momoko breathed a sigh of relief and muttered, "This author is really appetizing. I don't know how sweet the love story between Maruko and Miss Lixiang will be." Picked a few points on the corners of her lips, and Momoko did not have a low evaluation of this novel. Iwanami Bookstore, it's been a long time since Iwanami Shoten has received such an explosive manuscript. The phone was pinching the manuscript, and suddenly a question flashed through my mind. She hurriedly turned the manuscript page by page, and the corners of her mouth twitched after making sure again. Holding his forehead, the manuscript that Fang Hongdu brought over was only the content of the first chapter, about 20,000 words. Shaking her head, Peaches thought a little irritably. "No, it's too little. If it's only 20,000 words, even if the word is enlarged by one number, the printed book will be super thin. In general, the books they publish are 100,000 words per book. Take the current popular, Intimacy Paradise, as an example. It is a standard version of 100,000 words a volume. How this is published is really a question." Putting the manuscript down, Momoko began to think sadly, how to publish this Konoha love story. This is also to blame for Momoko herself. When the Red Bean manuscript came over just now, she read the beginning, and felt that Konoha love story was different from the routine books she had seen before, and then she was fascinated as soon as she read it. In addition, when Hongdu was talking to her about the price, she directly opened her mouth, so she also forgot about it. Alas, now she can only go to Hongdu to talk about this matter, and by the way, she wants the next draft. But it was already late at night, and it was rude to disturb others at this time. Momoko thought about it for a while and set the time for tomorrow after work, just in time to be able to do without overtime, the best of both worlds. Midori Izuki's home lives in the middle of the village, which is the most prosperous area of the entire Konoha village. The home is not particularly large, living alone. There is a cherry tree in front of the door, there are no leaves, and it is quite happy to be bare. When the sunset dyed half of the sky red, Momoko stood panting in front of the house of the Midori family, looking at the sign hanging on the door with a frightened face. Out of the mission, the master is not at home, messy in the wind. Peaches is a little depressed. You must know that she is just an ordinary person, and there is not a trace of chakra on her. It took her more than half an hour to walk to Midori's house. In fact, if Peaches could come a little earlier, they might be able to meet the Red Beans, and the two of them are the front foot and the back foot, which is just staggered. Alas, sighed, Momoko could only turn around and leave helplessly, thinking as she went. Is it possible to wait for the next few chapters to be published together after the Red Bean returns from the mission? The 20,000-word novel is too thin, and the cover of their Iwanami Bookstore book is made of cardboard with color plates, so if there are too many volumes, the cost will be too high. Moreover, I don't know if it will sell or not, so the best way is to wait for the Red Beans to come back. The bustling heart of the city is still full of people. Peaches walked and walked. A little hungry, she ate a little bit for breakfast today, and it was a coincidence that when she stopped, it happened to be the signature barbecue of Konoha Village, Barbecue Q. Touching her somewhat wilted stomach, Peaches stepped into the door of the Barbecue Q without hesitation, and after ordering the meal, she followed the waiter to find a single table and sit down. In today's Hokage world, there are no mobile phones. Just like many years ago, everyone didn't have mobile phones. Entertainment and pastime are still dominated by paper media. Newspapers or magazines are usually placed on the dinner table for the guests waiting to read and pass the time. As the hottest yakiniku queue in Konoha village, the guests are often full, and sometimes the food is served slowly, so newspapers and magazines are indispensable. There were some neatly placed on her desk, and Momoko took them all, intending to find a copy to read if she was interested, but as soon as she picked it up, a small book fell out with a click. Huh. Putting down the magazines, newspapers, etc., Momoko picked up the small book very curiously and said, "Isn't this a pocketbook?" Pocket books are the jargon of publishing houses, which refers to the smallest size of books, the size of a palm, that can fit directly into a pocket. When I opened it, I understood that the contents of it were comic books, the kind of small picture album for children. It should be someone's child who accidentally left it behind. Iwanami Shoten also prints these pocket books, but there are only a handful of them. Unlike ordinary books, these pocket books can be sold directly in convenience stores and grocery stores, and they can be sold in a more flexible way than ordinary books. Many shops, restaurants and the like, in order to attract children, will put some at the door. Children come in, are you afraid that parents will not enter? Momoko is a businessman who is appreciated by the big boss behind the scenes of Iwanami Bookstore, and her sensitivity to some business opportunities is not ordinarily strong. After flipping through the pocket book, she rubbed it a few more times, and suddenly she had a whim. Print, Konoha Love Story, as a pocket book. A palm-sized page. After printing the words, I am at most a page of 100 words, 20,000 words, it happens to be able to be 100 pieces of paper, and it will not be too thin to the touch. Moreover, in this way, the sales of Konoha Love Story can not only be limited to bookstores, but also ordinary shops, restaurants, and even taverns, as long as you give a little profit. Miss, your barbecue is here. At this time, the waiter also brought the barbecue, and Peaches retracted her thoughts and said, "Thank you," with a light smile. Momoko is in a very good mood. The ghost knows how long it will take for a shinobi to go out on a mission. She doesn't want to delay it any longer, and now the problem is solved. The most important thing is that the barbecue has been served. Put this thing aside, the world is big, and the meal is the biggest. Momoko is very efficient, and she will do it as soon as she thinks of it. So after eating and drinking to her heart's content, she decisively returned to the bookstore, and then began to prepare for the printing of Konoha Love Story. The first time was also to test the waters. She was going to print 10,000 copies of the pocket book, Konoha Love Story, and only sell it in Konoha for the time being, to see if she could open the market. Chapter 46. The scorpion dragged Deidara and ran directly, although Deidara was very unwilling to struggle and scold, but in the end he was only dragged away. And the horns couldn't ask for it. Looking at his partner who grew in the soil, he condensed the chakra directly in his hand, and then punched down to the ground. Bang! The entire piece of soil connected to Fijuan's body was beaten out, and he hurriedly stepped forward and supported it with one hand. With a hook of his foot on the ground, he grabbed the bloody scythe thrown with his left hand, and he didn't even take the money box, and the horns left with the flying section. All of a sudden, on the potholed battlefield, there were only 5 people left. Yunatsu, Kakashi, Kai, Azushi, and Yoshihide Tsuruta. The crisis was lifted, and Yusha was also relieved. If she could force her blindly, she didn't do it, and the most important thing was to retreat. This time, not only did Yoshihide Tsuruta come back, but the box of money was not lost, which was really happy. Yusha went over and brought the money box back, and then Kakashi squatted down, picked up the frightened Tsuruta Yoshihide, and the group of 5 went back to the hotel. After a fight, several people were tired, and it was already noon when they came back, so they sat at the dining table downstairs, called Shaoli down, and prepared to have lunch before discussing the following itinerary. Kakashi, what do you think those 4 traders in red clouds and black robes are going to do just now? Kai asked as he ate, his expression gone. The 4 people just now were too strong. If it wasn't for Yusha's shot, their side would either be dead or injured. Stopping his chopsticks, Kakashi shook his head and said, I don't know, but I have a hunch that they definitely won't make some good names, as you can see from their behavior. Yusha, Tsuruta Yoshihide and Xiao Li didn't intervene and ate quietly, especially Yoshisho, who hadn't eaten a full meal for 2 days, and now he was like a starving ghost. Azuki, Kakashi, and Kai discussed the Akatsuki organization back and forth, but they didn't ask about Yuna's ability that they had just shown. Advanced ninjutsu and secret techniques are only passed on to people or apprentices, and no one will be interested in inquiring about other people's secret arts, which can be said to be a taboo in the ninja world. For example, several big families in Konoha village, on the surface, seem to be happy and fight together for the peace of the village, but secretly they are also secretly competing. One aspect of this is in the mysticism. In order to protect the purity of the blood realm, the Hyuga family will never marry with foreigners, even if it is the same Hyuga surname. They also come up with a clan and a separate family, and use the caged bird to control the entire family. There are also 3 pigs, deer and butterflies. Although there is no blood limit, all the secret ninjutsu ninjas can learn, but it is only limited to their own family. Even if he becomes a team leader, as long as the apprentice is not from his own family, he still won't be able to teach a trick and a half. Moreover, Yusha is from another village, so he can't ask directly. But Azuki was so panicked that even when he was discussing important matters with Kai and Kakashi, he couldn't help but glance at Yusha from time to time, looking very aggrieved. Directly amused Yusha, he simply told the ability of the red bean crazy diamond, and finally shrugged his shoulders helplessly, and said, so after using it this time, it will probably take a while to use this ability next time. Oh. The look of the red bean suddenly realized. After everyone had eaten and drunk, Kakashi nodded to the table and said, all right, let's go back to the village and hand in the task. Kai and Hongdu all echoed and said yes. At this time, Yoshihide Tsuruta, who had been eating with his head down just now, suddenly said, wait. Can you let me go and bury my dead guards first? They all came out with me, and I was still uneasy to die outside in such an unknown way. Quote. Speaking of this, he paused for a moment, bit his lower lip again, and then spoke again. I can send a task to pay, please. Raising his eyebrows almost imperceptibly, Yusha silently opened the game map, and sure enough, he saw a bright light above Tsuruta Yoshihide's head, and he wanted to take over the task. His eyes rolled, and he said to Tsuruta Yoshihide, where did your guard die? In a cave. I can't transport it without you, I will really pay for it. Tsuruta Yoshihide said with a sincere face. Ding dong. Congratulations to the host for triggering the quest, burying the wandering undead. Quote. Mission description. Bury the guards of Yoshihide Tsuruta Yoshihide who killed Kakuto and Faden. Mission reward. Unknown. Kakashi glanced at Yoshihide Tsuruta, who was still very pale, sitting with his lips pursed and his back straight, and his eyes flashed with playfulness. I thought he was a rich young master who didn't know the warmth and coldness of the world and would only make trouble unreasonably, but I didn't expect it to be quite righteous. Since people still said that they would give money, this matter should not be delayed for too much time, so they should have agreed. Yoshihide Tsuruta found a coffin shop in the village, and hired a few porters to carry the corpses. The hiding place that Kakuto found was too steep, so Yusha and the others were responsible for carrying the corpses of the guards. After arriving at the cave, Yusha couldn't help but frown as she looked at the broken corpses all over the ground. At this time, the time of the crazy diamond had not yet passed, so he went directly up and restored all the corpses of those guards. This burial task, 5 ninjas and dozens of porters, took a whole day. A few people stayed at the hotel for another day before returning to Konoha village. It's been 3 days since Yusha and Red Bean went on a mission, and the pocketbook of Konoha Love Story has also been printed, and it has been put into various shops, taverns, bookstores, tea houses and the like in Konoha village. This morning, Nara Yoshino came out to buy today's ingredients, and after buying all the meat and vegetables, he suddenly remembered that the soy sauce at home was gone, so he planned to go to the store to buy a bottle. When she arrived at the shop she frequented, she said to the boss, "Boss, have a bottle of soy sauce." "Okay." The boss saw that it was Nara Yoshino, and immediately went to get it. Nara Yoshino was in the gap where the boss went to get soy sauce. Her eyes looked around, and suddenly found that there was an extra wooden shelf in front of the door, on which there were many pocketbooks neatly placed. She took it casually. The cover was colorful, and the background picture was a miniature version of the overall photo of Konoha, on which were written a few big characters, "Konoha Love Story." Huh. Nara Yoshino shook the pocketbook in his hand at the boss, who had come back very strangely, and said suspiciously, "This is." The boss put the soy sauce on the counter, looked at the pocketbook in Nara's hand and explained, "Hey. You said that this pocketbook was published and printed by Maruzendo Bookstore, and the staff came to sell it, so I asked me to help sell it at the door of the store. It looked good, so I took a few copies and put them at the door to sell them." Chapter 47. Flipping through it, Nara Yoshino didn't look at it carefully, but thought that the name of this pocketbook was quite interesting, and he was going to buy it and take a look at it when he was bored, so he asked as a pastime, "How much does this pocketbook cost?" "It's not expensive, it's only 98 taels." The boss said happily. "Mrs. Nara, today you can be regarded as opening the pocketbook in our store." Smiling, Nara Yoshino gave the boss the soy sauce and the money for the pocketbook, and then took the things and went home. Although it's still early, there are still one big and one small waiting for her to cook at home. Autumn mornings are slightly cold. Before the sky was completely bright, Nara Yoshino hummed a little tune, and when she returned home, she went into the kitchen, planning to start working on today's breakfast, and by the way, prepare today's bento for Shikamaru. After choosing the dish, Nara Yoshino stretched, patted her cheek and sobered up a little, looked down and saw that the pocketbook happened to be taken out by herself and put aside. She looked up and saw that it was still early, so she planned to read 2 pages to relieve her boredom. "But I didn't expect it. This look has fallen. Oh my god. There is still such a girl in Konoha village. Miss Rika is so beautiful." Nara Yoshino covered his face very exaggeratedly and began to sigh that although it was just a novel and not a manga, it also gave readers plenty of room to play. The human imagination is abundant. Moreover, Yusha's writing is really good, and the scenes depicted are also very delicate, so a picture naturally appeared in Nara Yoshino's mind. The gate of Konoha village, the sunset on the red sky, rare pedestrians, and the gentle, energetic girl Rika Akana who stood in place and waited quietly. When he read that Kanji Nagao greeted Rika shyly, Nara Yoshino couldn't help but clench the clothes on his chest fiercely. She has a girlish heart and is jumping around. As for when Satomi appeared, Nara Yoshino couldn't help frowning dissatisfiedly, and muttered a little unhappily, "What? Is Satomi a third party? I hate such people the most." Maruko must keep your eyes open. No matter how Nara Yoshino rejects Satomi, she is still a very important character in Konoha Love Story, and there is still a lot of pen and ink, which makes her look a little depressed. A pocketbook with a thickness of 100 pages is not much, but it still seems to take some time. What's more, anyone who reads a book has a characteristic: as long as the one that is interested in it is up, they can't help but keep reading. Nara Shikahisa got up in a loose kimono, yawned and came to the dining table in the living room, sat down in a daze, and planned to eat directly. It wasn't until his hand was empty that he shivered and came to his senses. Not to mention the food on the dinner table, there is not even a piece of tableware. The corners of his mouth twitched, and Nara Shikahisa wondered. What's the matter with Gino? Breakfast should have been made long ago. With a bewildered expression, he walked into the kitchen. Really? Why is it just like that? What's the content behind it? Damn the author, don't hurry up and write. After seeing the end of this chapter, Nara Yoshino angrily slapped his pocketbook on the table, crossed his waist and shouted in an unkind tone. Gen AI, where's our breakfast? After holding it for a long time, Nara Shikaku, who was standing at the door, swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said cautiously. Breakfast? What breakfast? Hearing her husband's voice, Nara Yoshino turned around, suddenly reacted, and couldn't help screaming, "Ah, I forgot to cook. Oh my god, what to do?" Nara Shikahisa sighed with a black line on his face, shook his head and whispered, "Women are really troublesome." At Ichiraku Ramen Restaurant, Handy was preparing the ingredients for today's business, and Calamus came late, and as soon as I entered the door, I saw a wooden shelf at the door, on which many pocketbooks were placed. After putting down the bag in his hand, Calamus didn't immediately change clothes, but walked to the wooden shelf and took a copy of Konoha Love Story, and began to look at it, and asked, "Dad, where did the pocketbook at the door come from?" "The staff of Maruzendo sent it, and it happened that there was still a vacancy in the store, so I will sell it." Handa responded while busy, and said again, "Hurry up and come into the back kitchen to help, otherwise the guests will come in a while." Calamus agreed strongly, "Hi. But secretly, her curiosity was aroused to see what was in this pocketbook. At this glance, I became calm. Calamus is exactly 16 or 17 years old, and it is the stage that interests her the most in this kind of affection. Especially the plot is unexpected, not the kind of old-fashioned plot, and I watched it with high interest all of a sudden. "Miss Lixiong, don't be discouraged, the balls belong to you." When Calamus happened to see Lixiong's slight stinging in the bottom of her heart, she almost couldn't help but shed tears, and her sympathy for the heroine flooded like a river. "Discouraged what? Come in and help, you girl." Seeing that Calamus didn't enter the back kitchen for a long time, he ran out directly, and when he saw his daughter squatting on the ground reading a pocketbook, he couldn't help but reprimand loudly. Calamus covered her ears, put the pocketbook back, and whispered, I know, Dad is really, why are you so angry?" Besides, Yamanaka Ino's mother, Mrs. Yamanaka, although the family is very powerful and does not need her to go out to work at all, she still opened a flower shop by her own hobbies, fiddling with flowers and plants every day, and living a very delicate life. Even if she is in her 30s, she is no different from a 20-year-old girl. Yesterday, when the flower shop was about to close, the staff of Maruzendo bookstore came to the store to discuss whether she could put some pocketbooks at the door to sell, and she thought about it and stayed. Now, after taking care of the flowers and plants, I am sitting on a chair and starting to watch Konoha Love Story, and I am attracted to it after a while. When Red pushed the door in, Mrs. Yamanaka didn't notice it, and was still engrossed in reading the pocketbook. "Mrs. Yamanaka, I want to buy a bouquet of carnations, can you please wrap them for me?" Red stood in front of her and said. Mrs. Yamanaka was unmoved, and after reading one page, she turned the page. Red frowned, raised her voice 2 degrees, and called out again, "Lady of the Mountain." Huh. This sound not only woke up Mrs. Yamanaka, but also startled her, and she quickly got up, folded the book and put it on the counter, and said apologetically, "It's red." "Excuse me, I was fascinated by reading just now, can you say it again?" Chapter 48. Please pack a bouquet of carnations, her favorite thing in life is your flowers here, I want to go and see her. Sunset Red smiled gently at Mrs. Yamanaka, and under the makeup of the flaming red lips, there was a little brightness. In his expression, there was no half-sentimental meaning. Mrs. Yamanaka has been opening a shop here for decades, and Sunset Red is half a regular customer to her. Listening to her words, I understood who she was going to bring to, and hurriedly went to pack carnations for people. When the bouquet of flowers was delivered to the eyes of the sunset, the carnation buds were still carrying water droplets, and in order to keep them delicate, Mrs. Yamanaka had just sprinkled water on them, which could be said to have done enough details. After taking the carnation and handing the money to Mrs. Yamanaka, Sunset Red watched her return to the counter, impatiently picked up the pocketbook, and then began to look through it. This strange behavior made Sunset Hong very curious. After all, Mrs. Yamanaka runs a flower shop and is a woman raised by a big family, so she usually doesn't have such a rude behavior. Could it be that the pocketbook in her hand is so attractive? "Lady Yamanaka, what are you looking at? Look, you're hooked," Sunset asked curiously. Mrs. Yamanaka casually pointed to the wooden shelf at the door and said, Konoha Love Story, 98 2 copies, the latest pocketbook launched by Maruzentang. It is super beautiful. Do you want to buy a copy and take a look? Okay. Sunset Red nodded decisively in agreement, put another 98 taels on the counter, and then went to the door to pick up a pocketbook, turned around and said, "That lady of the mountain, we'll see you next time, Tilda." No one expected that it was only a few hours before the two met again, and this meeting was not just the two of them. From a distance, there were many acquaintances. Mrs. Yamanaka closed the door of the flower shop early in the afternoon, because after reading the first chapter of Konoha Love Story, it was really not enjoyable, so she planned to go to Maruzendo to ask when the next pocketbook would come out. Before she could reach the door of Maruzendo, she saw a large group of people gathered there, almost 20 or 30 people, including Nara Yoshino, Ichiraku Ramen Restaurant's Calamus, and Sunset Red. Of course, the most eye-catching ones were Izumo and Zidetsu, who were standing out from the crowd, and the two were mixed in the crowd, a little inexplicably embarrassed. As a housewife, Nara Yoshino came to the wave relatively early, and she relied on eating food bought from outside for lunch, and after taking a nap, her heart was always itchy, eager to know the plot behind, and then she thought of the idea of going to Iwanami bookstore to ask. As for Calamus, she found an excuse to send ramen to customers and ran out secretly, naturally for the later part of Konoha Love Story. Sunset Red didn't come particularly early, just standing on the outermost periphery. The funniest thing is Izumo and Zidetsu. The two of them made an appointment to eat together after the shift handover at noon, and after entering the restaurant, they saw a wooden shelf standing on the side of the door, on which there were more than 20 pocketbooks of Konoha Love Story. The two of them also despised this kind of love and love book very much, and then when they were waiting for the meal to be served, they bought one by themselves, intending to see how funny the author's brain was, and write this kind of book. The result, well, really fragrant. There was no need to be on duty in the afternoon, and the two of them also rushed over to ask follow-up questions about the next chapter of Konoha Love Story. Momoko stood at the door of Maruzendo, facing the menacing customers, with a trace of horror on her face. All of them were here to urge the draft. And she doesn't have the content of the second chapter here, so she obviously lacks confidence. When will the second chapter of Konoha Love Story come out? I've finished reading the first chapter. Work faster. If you want to know the direction of Miss Rika's relationship with Wanji, please reveal it. Quote. A drop of cold sweat gradually flowed down her cheeks, and Momoko waved her hand at the customers, calming down before she spoke. Please be quiet for a while, and listen to me, okay? In an instant, the noisy scene was controlled. After all, it was the woman who mastered the follow-up plot of Konoha Love Story. At this time, Mrs. Yamanaka happened to walk to the periphery of the crowd and listened carefully. That's right, the author of this book is out for a while. The manuscript of the second chapter is not in my hands, and when she comes back, it will be printed immediately. Everyone is in a hurry. Let's disperse first. We will definitely get in touch with the author as soon as possible. Momoko's words also directly explained that the manuscript was not in her hands, and it was not a matter of Maruzendo's efficiency. After listening to the explanation, everyone complained a few words and left. After all, it was not interesting to block the door of the publishing house. After all, the content of the next chapter was still in the author's hands. After Mrs. Yamanaka greeted a few people she knew, she also went back a little disappointed. After such a fuss, the name of Konoha Love Story slowly spread, and many onlookers directly bought a copy to find out, this book is really so good. In the blink of an eye, the most prosperous area of Konoha village is a pedestrian street, where all kinds of clothing and decorations, food and snacks, and household goods are available, and it is also the favorite place for girls to go after school. Yoshimi Sato touched her long silky hair, and said to the two girls next to her, Night City, Mirioko, you don't see my hair like Miss Rika in Konoha Love Story, long and very soft tilde. The short-haired girl, that is, Night City, nodded affirmatively and said excitedly, that's right. I'm going to have long hair too, and Miss Lixiong is my idol now. Mei Lingzi tightened the strap of her school bag and was silent. Because she can't interject at all, she really has no interest in romance novels at all. Along the way, the two people around her chatted hotly, and she felt very uncomfortable as if she was isolated. It's obviously three people shopping, but I'm lonely. In order to be able to have a common topic to talk about with Mei Lingzi and Sato Yoshimi, Mei Lingzi bought a copy of Konoha Love Story when she passed by the store before going home, and planned to delve into it. What is there to be so obsessed with her two partners? You know, Night City is a short-haired person, and this time it's incredible that one of the characters in the book has long hair. Mao Yuxian loves to read very much. She was short of books some time ago, and because of the task of a month in a row, she hasn't visited the bookstore for a long time. That night, I went to a bookstore I frequented, planning to look for a book of poetry. When I went to the bookstore today, the boss happened to be absent. It was the proprietress who was cashiering, and the two knew each other. She was still reading the pocketbook when she was checking out, and after collecting the money, she took a copy of the same pocketbook from the wooden shelf directly from the side and handed it to Xian, strongly recommending her to buy a copy to see. Chapter 49. Through word of mouth, or continuous recommendations, the people of Konoha village sold out a full 10,000 pocketbooks in the next day. This can be said to be a grand occasion, and the last time this situation occurred was the sale of Intimacy Paradise. When Momoko, who was working overtime in the office, heard the news, she couldn't help but lie on the table and wail, "Midori-sama, where are you?" After calming down for a while, Momoko straightened up and decisively instructed the female secretary Fujita Oriko, who came to report just now, "Now go and tell the printing department that the pocketbook of Konoha Love Story will be printed with 50,000 copies, and then immediately send someone to guard the village gate. As long as Midori red beans enter the village, notify me immediately." Oriko nodded in response, and then hurriedly retreated. Peaches has a headache, and the pocketbook of this first chapter is sold out, and it can be printed overtime, but if the second chapter of Konoha Love Story has not been followed, it will be powerless. This afternoon, when a group of people came to ask when the next book of Konoha Love Story would come out, Momoko had already explained, but there were many new readers who couldn't help but run over and confirm with her again and again. However, this is also good news. At least, this book can be regarded as a fire, and it is a good thing for her, Iwanami Bookstore, and the boss behind the scenes. After coming out of the hotel room the next day, Yusha carried a big knife behind him, which was the task reward that Yusha got after completing the mission, burying the wandering undead, the slashing knife. The one he has is the curse of the left formation of Komamura. Two black tassels hang from the red and white hilt, and the blade is slender, widening by about a finger at the tip of the knife. The biggest feature of this knife is that the upper blade is wider than the lower blade, and the whole knife is thick and powerful, unpretentious, giving people a particularly stable feeling. However, the curse he received can only be solved at the moment. At the time of liberation, the damnation itself did not change, but after liberation, it was possible to attack parts of itself by gigantic parts. This includes the sword and the items to carry. Hongdu walked out of the next room, saw the knife on Yusha's back at a glance, let out a light, and said very strangely, "Where did the knife behind you come from?" "Ah, it." Yusha pointed to the damnation behind him that had been intimately reduced by the system, and explained, "This is a knife with special abilities that I collected before, and I have been placed in the sealing scroll, and the last move is no longer usable, so I was afraid that I would encounter a strong enemy when I went back, so I took it out." This explanation made Hongdu very curious. Yusha squeezed her eyes at the red bean, and said mysteriously, "When I go back, I'll show you." On the way back, Kakashi did not encounter the so-called strong enemy, and Kakashi carried Tsuruta Yoshihide, Kai and Shaoli on his back, and the group returned to the village in half a day. As soon as the five of them came back, they went straight to the Hokage building, and when they pushed open the office of the 3 generations of Hokage, the 3 generations were reading official documents and dealing with the affairs of the village. "Kakashi, you're back." The 3rd generation Hokage put down his pen and raised his head, and said with a smile, "This is estimated to be the fastest S-class mission in the village, just come back safely." The 5 of them stood in a row, and Tsuruta Yoshihide was picked up by Genichiro Tsuruta when he entered the Hokage building, and it is said that he actually wanted his son to be heartfelt, and he wanted to see people non-stop. When Yusha and them entered the village, they had already sent someone to inform them. "Yes, Miome-sama." Kakashi began to report the mission to Sarutobi in a serious way, and it was all procedural, and Unatsu yawned, saying that he was really not interested. Ding dong. Congratulations to the host for completing the mission, rescuing the son of a rich merchant. Get reward. Pikachu. After the system's prompt fell, a psychic beast scroll immediately appeared in Yusha's mind. It turned out to be distributed in the form of psychic beasts, Yusha thought to herself. This system is quite humane. If it weren't for the way of a psychic beast to distribute Pikachu, it's estimated that he really has to take this yellow electric rat with him every day. It's cute, but it's very troublesome. During the debriefing mission, Kakashi kept silent about what was special about Yuna, which Yusha asked. After he finished reporting the details of the task, Ape Fei nodded and thought for a while and said, "Now that the mission has been completed, you can go back and have a good rest." Kakashi and Kai still have to report to Sarutobi Hazashi about the Akatsuki organization they met during the mission, although the other party is not targeting them Konoha village, but a group of traitorous ninja gathered together, and they may do something to endanger the ninja world. Kai Shaoli was taken away by Kai and asked him to go to the training ground for daily training first. Yusha and Azuki were fine, and walked out of the Hokage building with their companions. However, as soon as she got out of the gate, she was stopped by the peach that suddenly burst out, and she opened her arms breathlessly and said, "Wait, Midori-sama. I have something to tell you." From the beginning of Yusha and Red Beans, as soon as they entered the gate of the village, Peaches received the news, and they quickly ran to the Hokage building, for fear that if they were not careful, Red Beans went out to run the task again, and who would she cry with at that time? Yesterday, after Peaches came home from work, there were book lovers who ran to her door and squatted, just to know the follow-up plot. If the Red Bean doesn't appear again, it is estimated that she can only go to post a high-level task to find someone. Yusha looked at the woman who stopped them. She looked confused, she looked out of breath, as if she had just run a marathon. She pulled the sleeve of the Red Bean, and asked softly, "Who is this sister?" Hongdu touched his nose and introduced Yusha. "This is the person in charge of Maruzendo, Kinomoto Momoko. I just talked to her about a big deal a few days ago." This sentence directly made Yusha understand the identity of Kinomoto Momoko, and at the same time, he did not reveal that he was the author of Konoha Love Story, and he spoke very skillfully. "Ah, hello Sister Peach." Yusha smiled and said hello, this is his future rich man. "Ah, hello." After Momoko calmed down, she smiled at Yusha too, and turned to Red Bean with a serious face. "Midori-sama, you can be regarded as back. Is there a second chapter of Konoha Love Story? Why are you in such a hurry?" Red Bean glanced at Momoko suspiciously. She was busy with a mission a few days ago, and she didn't have time to send the manuscript that Yusha gave her to Iwanami bookstore. Momoko smiled bitterly, and then told the two of them the twists and turns of the matter, and finally couldn't help but sigh and said, "Midori-sama, if your friend doesn't give me the rest of the manuscript again, then I guess I'll go crazy." Yusha, who was listening to the whole process on the sidelines, couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't expect that in just 3 days after the manuscript was handed over to the other party, more than 10,000 copies of Konoha Love Story had been sold, and 50,000 copies had already been printed and listed. What he admires the most is Peach's new marketing method. Chapter 50. What a marketing geek. Yusha originally thought that if this Konoha Love Story wanted to be listed, he would have to wait for him to finish writing half of it. After all, how to print a 20,000-word book is a problem. The last time I talked to the bookstore uncle, he probably also knew that a book was about 100,000 words, but he never expected that Momoko would directly make the 20,000 words of Konoha Love Story into a pocket book, and the response was not bad. Red Bean glanced at Peaches with some sympathy. The dark circles under her eyes proved that she really didn't sleep well, untied her backpack, took out the manuscript of the second chapter given by Yusha before the mission, handed it to her, and said, "This is the next chapter. As for the third chapter, it is estimated that I will have to wait for the author to finish writing it before giving it to you." As far as Hongdu knows, in the past few days since the mission, Yusha has not written a word. After taking the manuscript with both hands, Peach's dull eyes lit up a little, and there was a chapter that could last for a few days. But in the subsequent chapters, I still have to keep up, so I asked, "Midori-sama, I don't know if it's convenient to reveal the author. You're on a lot of assignments, and it's hard for me to contact you." Quote. The red bean is a little embarrassed, and this is right next to it. Yusha looked at the embarrassed appearance of the red bean, and directly exploded her identity. After all, Momoko is the person in charge of Iwanami bookstore, so it would be nice to stress to her that she didn't tell her that the author was him. Sister Peach, Konoha Love Story, was written by me. You can contact me directly if you have something in the future. You. Momoko looked at Yusha, who suddenly spoke, and suddenly felt a little confused. How could a 10-year-old child write such a good book? Incredible. Hongdu saw that Yusha exploded, so he helped and said, "Yes, it's Yusha. I can testify." Although Momoko was shocked that Yusha was the author, I immediately accepted it, and now as long as I can give a manuscript, I am an uncle, no matter whether he is old or young, she has to provide for it well. After getting the manuscript, Peach's purpose can be considered to have been achieved. He took out a thick envelope from his small bag, handed it to Yunatsu, and said, "I was going to give it to Midori-sama and let her pass it on to you. A pocket book is 98 taels, and 10,000 copies have been sold, according to the commission of 1.2, so it is 117,600 taels. When all the remaining 50,000 copies are sold, I will give you the rest of the money." Quote. Thank you. Yusha took the thick envelope, and it was a joy in her heart, which was a huge amount of money. Momoko was still in a hurry to go back to Maruzendo to arrange the printing of a new chapter of the pocket book, and after saying goodbye to the two of them, she left in a hurry. At this time, Kakashi, Kai, and just happened to come out. Kakashi greeted the two of them. "Red Bean, Yunatsu, you two haven't left yet." The two of them turned around and saw Kakashi's phone carrying a large bag, which didn't look light. Hongdu glanced at the bag and said, "I met an acquaintance just now, so we chatted a few words." Kakashi, "Is the reward for this mission in the bag?" "Yes." Kakashi stopped, then threw the black bag on the ground, kicking up a bit of dust. He directly crouched down, opened it and said, "Come on, divide the money. Luckily, you two haven't made it far, otherwise I'd have had to send them to your house one by one." Quote. No wonder I always felt like I forgot something just now. It turned out that I forgot to receive the reward for completing the task. Can you divide the money on the street? The corners of Yusha's mouth twitched. This operation was too angry. At the door of the Hokage building, there are ninjas who take tasks and submit tasks, and people come and go. It's really a strong man who is not afraid of being robbed by others. Watching Kai and Hongdu squatting down one after another, Yusha felt that standing was the most eye-catching, so he simply squatted down without shame. It was originally a justifiable task reward, but there was a sense of guilt in sharing the spoils of this series of operations. In this mission S level, the bounty given by Mr. Genichiro Saruta is 1 million taels, and an additional 1 million taels will be added in the later stage, and the task of Yoshihide Saruta is 100,000 taels. There are 5 of us, and no one can get 440,000 taels. Kakashi explained, and then spoke, "Let's just open the backpack, otherwise it's too easy to attract jealousy when you go home with so much money." Yunatsu. It's quite hateful. Quote. After everyone took their share, there was still the one that belonged to Shaoli in the black bag. Kakashi directly picked it up and threw it to Kai, and said with a smile, "Your disciple, you can send it over personally." "Okay, I'm going to the training ground in a moment anyway." Kaido threw the black bag on his shoulder, then stood up and said, "It's nothing, I'll leave first, Shaoli is still waiting for me." Kakashi nodded and said, "Hi. After Kai left, Yunatsu, Azuki, and Kakashi also parted ways, and just finished their mission. They all planned to go back and have a good rest. Yusha went to pay the deposit first, and then went to the building materials market to buy a piece of glass, and then returned to his long-lost rental house. The maple leaves in the courtyard have all fallen and are spread in a thick layer on the ground, and there is a natural beauty that no one cares for. After setting up the window, Yusha sat down on the bed and took out the scroll, intending to take a look at the reward he had received for the mission, Pikachu. Laying the scroll on the bed, Yusha gathered the chakra in his hand, pressed it on the circle of sigils, and said, "Solution." With a bang, Yusha took his hand away, and after the white mist cleared, a round electric rat appeared in the center of the scroll. Its whole body fur was yellow, its ears were long, and the tips were black. It has a small mouth that looks like a symbol omega, black eyes that are blinking at Yuna, and 2 red circles on its cheeks, which look very kawaii. Pick up, pick up. Pikachu obediently sat in the center of the seal scroll, rolled his ears, and yelled at Yusha twice, not making a fuss at all. It seemed to be very quiet. It doesn't seem to be a leather god, just an ordinary Pikachu. Yusha sighed, slightly disappointed. Ash's one can directly scare the divine beast, and the acting skills are first class. But I'm still happy to get Pikachu. I've always wanted one before. Picking Pikachu in his arms, Yunatsu's mind suddenly flashed to the skills he had mastered. A flash of lightning, 100,000 volts, a steel tail. That's good, little thing, it's amazing. After Yusha was surprised, he touched Pikachu's head like a reward, and he had 3 skills just after he appeared, which was really unexpected. Chapter 51. Taking Pikachu back to the sealing scroll, Yusha pulled over the bag that he had thrown on the desk, took out all the money inside, and counted it. Counting the cost of room and board and the cost of buying glass in the past few days, he still has 250,000 taels left, which can be regarded as a small profit. And Konoha Love Story seems to be selling well, and it should be able to afford his daily expenses. After sorting out all the money, Yusha put it in the drawer under the desk, and when it was about to be closed, he suddenly remembered that he still owed Red Beans a meal, so he took it out again, planning to invite someone to eat a good meal. After changing the ninja suit, Yusha took a hot bath, and after relieving the fatigue of running around for the past few days, he changed into a relatively warm clothes, went out, walked a few steps, and suddenly remembered a very serious problem. He didn't know where Hongdu's home was, and it seemed that he could only ask Hongdu to come to him to ask for a manuscript to read. But now that I'm out, Yusha really doesn't want to climb back upstairs like this. Touching his nose, a figure suddenly flashed in Yusha's mind. Ino. During this time, Ino has really helped him a lot, and he should express it well. After deciding on it, Yusha went directly to the flower shop run by Ino's mother, and usually after school, Ino would go to help take care of the flower shop first. When passing by the jewelry store, Yusha also went in on purpose, planning to pick out a gift for Ino. The owner is a beautiful sister in her 20s, wearing a navy blue contract, with a green plum comb braid carved on the top of her head. When she saw Yusha come in, she raised her eyebrows slightly, and said playfully, "Little brother, this is a special store for girls' jewelry, are you making a mistake?" Yusha raised her head, looked at her beautiful sister's playful eyes, pretended to be ignorant, smiled, and said, "Sister, I have a friend who is going to have a birthday and wants to pick a gift for her." Oh Tilda, the female shopkeeper, who is also Chinami Ogata, stretched her voice, nodded her chin, and said with a look of me understanding, "It's a little girlfriend, right? Then you pick." The content of this store is quite complete. What hairpins, step shakes, combs, rouge are all available. Yusha looked around twice on the shelves. There is a feeling of dazzle. The girl's world, he really doesn't understand it. Finally, under the innermost glass counter, he saw a silk handkerchief in a wooden box, several styles, but the one with the light color on the bottom and the white bellflower embroidered with it caught his eye. This handkerchief immediately reminded Yunatsu of the appearance of Ino running towards him in a kimono and a bellflower on his head holding 4 bulky lunch boxes at the school festival. After taking a closer look, it was quite suitable for Ino's little girl, and Yusha turned to Chinami and said, "Sister, can you help me get this handkerchief?" Chinami came over and said, "Which one?" "Refer to me." Quote. Yusha pointed to the lilac bellflower handkerchief. Chinami raised her eyebrows slightly, and while taking out the handkerchief, she said, "Little brother has good eyes, this is handmade, very delicate, it is just right for a girl. However, the price is also a little expensive, 5,000 taels." Quote. Looking closely, Yusha found that the stitches did not leak, and I don't know what stitches were used. The two bellflower flowers were embroidered on the lower left side of the handkerchief. There was a lively feeling, and it was very soft and smooth to the touch. That's it. Yusha was satisfied, took out 5,000 taels directly from her wallet, handed it to Chinami, and said, "Trouble sister to help me wrap it, thank you." By the time Ino went to the flower shop after school to help take care of the business, there were very few people who came to buy flowers, and the shop was very quiet. After all, few people would go to deliver flowers in the evening. Although Mrs. Yamanaka still has a lot of thoughts about Konoha love story, the new book has not yet come out, and she has no choice. Moreover, the work of a florist is easy, but it is tedious. When Ino helps look after the store, she sorts out the light flowers to ensure that they are sufficient and fresh. Today the florist just got a batch of fresh flowers and needed to be transplanted. Yamanaka had nothing to do, but he was also called in to help, and when Yunatsu stepped into the flower shop, he happened to be moving flower pots and dirt in the back storeroom. Ino, Aunt Yamanaka. After Yusha saw two people take the initiative to say hello. Ino, who was lying on the counter with a lot of boredom, immediately sat up straight when he heard Yusha's voice, and said excitedly, "Ah, Yusha, why are you here?" Mrs. Yamanaka also stood up, looked back at Yusha, smiled gently, and said very kindly, "Yusha, are you here to find Ino?" She still has a good impression of Yusha. Yusha nodded, and then said, "The bento last time was delicious, thank you, Aunt Yamanaka." The lady of the mountain, who was praised, couldn't help but clap her hands and said happily, "That's really great. If you have the opportunity, you can come to our house as a guest, and your aunt will cook for you to eat." Quote. "Okay, I will definitely go to my aunt's house if I have a chance." After Yusha finished speaking, he walked to Ino's side, and then handed the gift to Ino. "Thank you for helping me during the last campus festival. Well, I'll give you a small gift, and I'll treat you to something delicious in the evening." Quote. Yamanaka Kaiichi was working well in the small warehouse at the back, and suddenly heard that someone was going to ask his daughter to dinner, and he couldn't help but run out immediately, holding a flower pot in his right hand, pointing at Yusha and asking, "Boy, who are you? What do you want to do with my daughter?" He heard it clearly just now. His daughter was the one who brought this kid a meal last time, and when she came back, she still looked like she was not giving up. "Now I have to inch in. I went directly to the store to give gifts to Ino, and asked to go out to eat. Are the little ghosts so active now? At first glance, they are not serious people, and they have to keep this kid away from their daughter." Looking at the appearance of Yamanaka Haii's daughter's slave in front of him, Yusha suddenly had a prank mind, and replied with a familiar look, "My name is Yusha, and I am a good friend of Ino. Could it be that you are an uncle?" "Don't be so affectionate with your uncle and uncle, we don't know each other." After receiving the gift, Ino, who was already beating his heart, saw his father's abnormal appearance, and said angrily, "Dad, why are you suddenly so angry with Yusha?" Critical. Although the girl is outgoing, but you are only 10 years old, Ino, Haijang endured the heartache and said, "This kid's purpose is not pure, Dad is protecting you." "What purpose is not pure?" Ino blinked, not understanding what his father was talking about. Chapter 52. The corners of Hai's mouth twitched, and he didn't know how to answer for a while. For Ino's wink, he was powerless to resist at all. Such a good daughter can only be his own little padded jacket, no one wants to snatch it. Thinking like this, he was even more dissatisfied with Yusha, who was standing in front of his daughter. Fierce and vicious, glared at Yusha. Yamanaka Hai pinched his waist and gritted his teeth and said, "You little ghost, don't try to kidnap my daughter." "Oops. Who is it?" There was a sudden pain in his head, and Hai couldn't help but squat down, protect his head with both hands, and yelled back. Who do you say I am? Mrs. Yamanaka, holding her fist and shining a punch on Hai's head, said angrily, what are you doing in the affairs of other people's children? Is the flower pot moved or the flowers transplanted? Hai. Lady Yamanaka. What am I? Staring at the Lady Yamanaka with great interest, she was in the tune. Teach, Yamanaka Haichi, Yusha thinks this scene is inexplicably cool. Tisk, the old man who scolded him just now is as obedient as a meow. Ino, you don't have to help your mother look after the store, go play with Yusha. Lady Yamanaka said to Ino suddenly, then looked at Yusha again, smiled gently, and advised, Yusha, you have to send Ino home safely. Yusha immediately reacted. Mission completion guaranteed. After coming out of the flower shop, Yusha and Ino walked around and finally walked into a restaurant, ready for a delicious meal. This restaurant is also famous throughout Konoha village, especially the Keizeki cuisine is very authentic, and after the dishes are ready, the two of them start chatting while enjoying the food. Ino rolled her eyes twice, and she said, I haven't seen you for a few days, are you staying at home again? Before, you didn't go out for a month, and you weren't afraid of smelling. Hey, what do you think I'm like? Yusha picked up a piece of sashimi, dipped it in the seasoning, put it in his mouth, and swallowed it before explaining, in order to make money, I recently went to take on a task. This mission was a long trip, which was more troublesome, and it took 3 or 4 days. Quote. Speaking of the task, Ino became interested, put down his chopsticks, leaned forward slightly, and said excitedly, what mission needs to go outside the village, and it will take 3 or 4 days to go. Tell me about it. Seeing Ino's excited appearance, Yusha also put down his chopsticks, and then described the process of rescuing Tsuruta Yoshihide to her with emotion, and at the same time bragged that their side completely crushed the Shao organization, how powerful they are, etc., and very vaguely hid all those dangerous parts. Ino propped his chin with both hands, and was stunned when he listened. The 10-year-old child is full of curiosity about the outside world, and since she was born, she has only played in the outskirts of the village at most, or in the company of her family. Staring at Yusha with some envy, there were still 2 years before she became an official shinobi, and it was almost impossible for her to receive the kind of task that Yusha said before that. When Yusha talked about some strange ninjutsu, Ino couldn't help but start complaining. Alas, the ninja school only teaches some basic ninjutsu, and the family only teaches secret arts, I can't learn other powerful ninjutsu, it's really boring. After listening to Ino's complaint, Yusha thought about it, took out Pikachu's scroll, opened it and put it in the empty space of the dining table, and summoned Pikachu. Bang! After Pikachu appeared, he called out very obediently, Pika Pika. Kawaii. What is it? Being cute by the sudden appearance of Pikachu, Ino reached out and picked up Pikachu, touched his soft yellow hair, and said in surprise, oh my god, this is too cute, isn't it? Seeing Ino holding Pikachu and rubbing it in his face, and Pikachu obediently shouted, Pika Pika, Yusha inexplicably felt that this picture was very harmonious, and he explained to Ino, this is my psychic beast, do you want to learn psychics? Yes. Of course, such a cute little one. Ino said excitedly. Although Pikachu was disguised as a psychic beast by the system, it could be summoned by others as long as Yusha agreed, and after writing Ino's name, he told her the handprint that summoned Pikachu. It didn't take long for Ino to learn, and he excitedly played with Pikachu. After eating, after Yusha sent Ino home, it was already 8 o'clock in the evening, and after saying goodbye to her, Yusha slowly returned home under Hai's cannibalistic gaze. After arriving home, Yusha immediately began to continue writing the 3rd chapter of Konoha Love Story, and Momoko also asked for Yusha's address in front of the Hokage building that day, and the two said okay, Yusha will send the manuscript himself if he is free, and if he is really not free, he will pick up Momoko. However, it's basically sent by Yusha, a fixed chapter a day. In the next few days, Peaches was fully funded because of the summer season, and directly opened the daily update state, with a new volume every day. Sales are also in full swing, and the sales in Konoha even directly exceed the Intimacy Heaven. Maruzendo can only continue to reprint, such as the first volume, the front page of 10,000 copies, sold for about 3 days, but the second batch of 50,000 copies were sold out after only a day and a half, and the Peaches also figured out the law in the next few days, and the sales of the first 3 pocketbooks of Konoha Love Story were about stable at 300,000 copies in one chapter, so the printing behind it was directly based on 300,000 copies. Konoha Love Story is considered popular in the entire Konoha village, and the sales are increasing. Since Yusha had money, she rarely went out, and she stayed at home to concentrate on writing, and invited Red Beans to have a meal in the middle. Konoha Love Story has a total of 11 episodes, and it is 11 volumes written as a pocketbook, plus 2 volumes that have been completed before the mission, and it took Yusha another 8 days to write 3 to 10 volumes, and this update speed made Peaches almost move to tears. If only the Intimacy Heaven could have this speed. Today is the 9th day, and after getting up in the morning, Yusha sits at the desk, but it is very entangled. There's also the last chapter, and Yusha is thinking very seriously about how to end the book. In Tokyo Love Story, Kanji Nagao finally chose to be with Satomi Sakaguchi, but when he occasionally goes out these days, all he hears is talking about Rika. Almost all female readers in Konoha Village think that Kanji Nagao should be with Rika Akana, and they are very much looking forward to this big reversal. The reason for this phenomenon is very simple, because Yusha's novel is roughly adapted from the TV series version, and the TV series version of the character of Lixiong has been deified, the advantages are magnified, and the black spots are removed. Chapter 53. Yusha sat at her desk and thought about it for a while, but finally decided to write according to the original plot of Tokyo Love Story. The unexpected and reasonable ending, after all, he sat in front of him so much foreshadowing. The combination of Nagao Kanji and Satomi Sakaguchi seems to be an imperfect ending, but it can cause more discussion. There is another reason: it is too troublesome to think about the ending again, and he doesn't want to use that brain at all. When Yuna sends the last chapter to Momoko's office at Maruzendo, Azuki is also there. The two of them were discussing something, and they looked very happy. "Sister Hongdu and Sister Peach, what are you two discussing? We had such a nice chat." Yusha pushed the door and asked curiously. "Ah, Yuna." After Hongdu saw Yusha coming in, he jumped up excitedly, and then ran to Yusha, stretched out his hand and said, "Manuscript draft, I want to see the finale. Hurry up and give it to me, Tilda." "Hey." Slowly took out the manuscript of the last chapter and handed it to Hongdu's hand. Yusha raised his eyebrows and said, "If the ending is not the same as you think, don't beat me." Waving his hand, Azuki took the manuscript to the opposite side of Momoko, and said with a nonchalant face, "I accept the fact that Miss Satomi is with Maruko. My Miss Lixiong deserves a better man to love her, and Maruko is not worthy of her." The corners of Yusha's mouth twitched, and the idea of red beans was also quite strange. "That's right, it's called AQ Spirit." He turned to Momoko's side and said, "Sister Momoko, this is the last chapter." Momoko took a sip of tea, then winked at Yusha and said, "When will you open the second book?" Poof. Yusha couldn't help but be happy, looked at Peach's impatient appearance, and teased, "You still don't give me a vacation." "I haven't figured out what to write yet, so I'll have to wait a while." Quote. Momoko sighed, directly took a financial statement to Yusha, raised her head and said, "This is probably the estimated income of Konoha Love Story, including the last volume. After all the sales, you can be regarded as saving the life of Maruzendo in a time of crisis." After taking the financial statements and scanning them, Yusha couldn't help but be surprised. There are a total of 11 volumes of Konoha Love Story. Almost every volume can sell 300,000 copies, and some even more. In this way, he expects his income to be about 40 million taels. Do you feel like you've become a multimillionaire in an instant? Yusha pointed to the final number in shock, and still asked Momoko in disbelief, "Is this true?" Momoko smiled and nodded. "I didn't expect that the income this time would be so good, although it can't surpass Intimacy Paradise, it has become the second best-selling book on the market. Quote. After Yosha had dinner outside, he still couldn't believe it when he returned home. He suddenly became a multimillionaire, and he felt a kind of cool to get rich overnight. Before he left, Momoko asked him to open a book as soon as possible, and he thought about it for half an hour, but he really didn't have a clue, so he put it aside first. Now there is a question in front of him: what can he do with such a huge amount of money? After going back and forth, Yosha finally decided to invest. Because he observed a strange phenomenon: even if it is as powerful as Konoha village, the main source of finance is actually relying on missions. How to say it? I feel that the ninja brains of this world can't turn around, and their thinking patterns are solidified. For example, if you don't cut in white, you are already rebellious, and you even go to take on private tasks with your eyes, and if you rob Kaido directly, won't you be able to live a chic life? There is also Kakashi. As an elite shinobi, he usually gets a lot of rewards for missions, but in addition to eating and drinking, he usually buys a copy of Intimacy Paradise for entertainment. By the way, there are also red beans. Except for buying 3 color balls, I haven't seen her do anything else. Thinking of this, Yusha couldn't help but sigh. These rich ninja bosses really have no economic mind. All the money is moldy at home, and the capital is completely out of circulation. What is the most profitable thing to do? The first thing that crossed Yusha's mind was real estate, but it was immediately denied by himself. Although Konoha village has gone through the 9-tailed fox rebellion and the Uchiha extermination, there are a lot of vacant land and empty houses, and there is a lot of room for operation. But if you hoard land now, in more than 2 years, Konoha village will have to experience the first destruction, Orochimaru's invasion, and within 7 or 8 years, you will have to experience Pain's invasion. If you do real estate, you will definitely lose money in the middle, and it is estimated that you will have to wait until Boruto is born. Squinted his eyes. The current tax situation in the Fire Country is that the agricultural tax is higher than the commercial tax, and the commercial tax is directly so low that it is outrageous. And if he remembers correctly, there should be no taxes on cultural industries, such as newspapers, publishing, bookstores. Because in the entire Hokage's world, most of the people who are engaged in business and literature are the landlord class, scholars, etc. These are vested interests, and they are the ruling class of the country, so there are fewer taxes. Heavy taxes are levied on peasants or ordinary people. Lying on the bed and tossing and turning, he finally decided to go into the cultural industry. After all, now that he's writing a book, he knows Kinomoto Momoko, so you can listen to her advice. Early the next morning, Yusha went to Maruzendo. Momoko was taken aback when she saw Yusha push the door in, looked up at her watch, and then said a little strangely, "It's only 8:30, why are you here? Isn't the manuscript delivered?" "Hee, I'm here today to discuss something with you." Yusha walked in, put the pastry she had bought on Peach's table, and sat down across from her, telling her the truth. It's a bit difficult to insert it directly into the cultural industry. Momoko frowned, thought for a while, suddenly slapped the table, and said with some excitement, "By the way, I remembered. My boss seems to be ready to sell all the shares of Konoha newspaper, and he has recently had some problems with the capital chain, and he is raising money everywhere." Quote. Yusha's eyes lit up and said, "How much does it cost to get all the shares?" Looking at Yusha's excited appearance, Momoko shook her head and said, 200 million taels, your current total manuscript fee is only 40 million taels, there is a bit of a gap. It's okay, you give me the contact information, as for the money, I'll figure it out. Yuna said to Momoko. Took out a piece of paper, Momoko quickly wrote an address on it, and then handed it to Yusha, and said, "How good it is to write a book honestly, the money you earn is enough to spend, I really don't understand you." Chapter 54. After Yusha got the contact information, he came out of Maruzendo, and the 200 million taels that Momoko said just now is indeed a problem. But he wanted to try. If it weren't for the big boss behind Peaches who was in a hurry to get money, he wouldn't have sold it at such a low price of 200 million taels, you must know that Konoha is just such a newspaper, and winning it is equivalent to mastering the entire Konoha fishing boat and becoming a media tycoon all of a sudden. He had also bought 2 copies of Konoha's newspaper before to take a look. How to say it, it was too honest and extremely formulaic. Yusha suspected that they didn't even have a polished editor, and when he became the boss of the newspaper, he would definitely be able to increase sales several times, and Yusha would still have 2 tricks in the shock department. When the time comes, won't you say that the wind is the rain? Thinking of this, Yusha's face couldn't help but turn up. But where are these 200 million taels going to be raised? Yusha pondered as she walked along the road. In fact, he already had an idea in mind. That's Rakakashi, Azuki and Kai. They are shares, as mentioned earlier. Although these people make a lot of money doing tasks, they don't spend anything at all, and the money is lying at home and moldy, which is a waste. Thinking like this, Yunatsu's first hit was Kakashi's idea, and after so many years, it is estimated that he has saved the most money. Kakashi's reputation in the entire Konoha is quite loud, so Yunatsu knew where he lived as soon as he inquired, and when he went, Kakashi was idle at home. Kakashi came to open the door, and when he saw that it was Yunatsu, he was still slightly flustered, and usually no one came to visit him except for Kai, who sometimes had a nervous time to come to him for a duel. While Kakashi was in the Wyleng, Yunatsu was observing the Hachiki family's mansion. The mansion is not big, but it is very beautiful, and the courtyards on both sides leading to the inner door have Eurasian licorice and horse cherry pills sticking out in the bushes, and the huge contrast in the leaf shape and shape forms a strong vision. Not far away, there are a few purple-leaved plums and white magnolias, but because it is autumn, the leaves have fallen a lot. Retracting his gaze, Yunatsu looked at Kakashi, who was a little stunned, and said, "Don't you invite me in?" "Huh. Oh. Come on in." Kakashi came back to his senses and hurriedly invited Yunatsu in. In the living room, Kakashi asked him to sit casually and then make his own tea. Yusha casually looked at the living room, and there was a half-eaten lunch box on the table. It was an izakaya's takeaway, and Yusha had ordered it at home before. Bringing out 2 cups of barley tea, Kakashi sat on the sofa opposite Yusha, gently put the tea down, and made a "please" gesture, while the other cup was directly held in the palm of his hand, a little hot. Sure enough, it's a single old man who lives alone. Yusha smelled the rich fragrance of barley tea and couldn't help but smile evilly. Different from gongfu tea, barley tea can be drunk as long as it is soaked in hot water, and the process is very simple, just one word: simple and rude. Kakashi took advantage of Yunatsu's sip of tea and asked a little casually, "Come to me, is there something wrong?" Putting the cup down, Yunatsu didn't rush to answer Kakashi's question, and took out the first volume of Konoha Love Story from his pocket, pushed it in front of him, and asked rhetorically, "Kakashi-senpai, do you know this book?" When Yunatsu took out the book, Kakashi recognized it by its incomparably familiar cover, Konoha Love Story. "You know, the women of Konoha village have been frantically discussing a book these days, which is Konoha Love Story, which is no worse than the excitement of men when Intimacy Paradise was published. The most terrifying thing is that there are still a small number of men who are crazy about this book." Unfortunately, he also fell into the pit. 3 days ago, out of curiosity, he also bought a copy of Konoha Love Story to see, and this look sank directly, and yesterday he took the time to buy all 1 to 10 volumes, and it seems that today is the day when the last issue is on sale. A big man is addicted to romance novels like Konoha Love Story, and it's a little too shameful to say it. Kakashi's eyes rolled slightly, and he just said, "I've heard of this book, and it's been very famous recently. Why are you asking this?" Yusha smiled mysteriously, then pretended to cough twice, and blew up his identity. "I wrote this, Konoha Love Story, and yesterday when I went to send the finale manuscript to the person in charge of Maruzentang, Kinomoto Momoko, she and I paid a total of 40 million taels." Kakashi was shocked to see the 10-year-old sitting across from him say this in a calm tone. "The first is to write a book for about 10 days, and I made 40 million taels. You know, An S-level task is only a bounty of about 1 million taels. And after the task reaches the S level, it is basically to fight with your life and take money from the hands of death. The second thing that shocked Kakashi was that Yunatsu could even write a book. Unlike modern people, where anyone can post a book online, in the world of the Hokage, paper media completely dominates. If a person can write a book and publish it, he must be a capable person. Quietly looked at Yunatsu. Although Kakashi was shocked, he still couldn't guess his intention. Could it be to show off his identity, and by the way, show off that he is rich now? It's obviously not that simple. Yusha looked at Kakashi with a somewhat incomprehensible look, and he didn't plan to sell Guanzi anymore, and began to slowly tell him his intentions. You know the Konoha newspaper, right? I learned from Momoko that the big boss behind the Konoha newspaper is planning to transfer the entire Konoha newspaper with 100% of the shares because of some problems in the capital chain recently, a total of 200 million taels, and I am very interested in Konoha newspaper. But as I said just now, I only have 40 million, and the money is not enough, so I want to pull a few more people to do a newspaper business together. After explaining in one breath, Yusha picked up the barley tea and took another sip to moisten his throat. Kakashi understood and said, "So, you found me?" "Yes." Yusha hurriedly said, "I still have some experience in the operation and management of the newspaper, and my writing is also very strong." After saying this, Yusha deliberately used her finger to point 2 points on Konoha love story, as if to increase the credibility of her words. At that time, the sales volume of Konoha newspaper will definitely skyrocket, and you can just wait at home for dividends and count the money. How about it? Yusha continued to blow for half an hour, and at this time his mouth was indeed a little dry, so he stopped, picked up the still warm barley tea and drank it. Chapter 55. Sitting in a precarious position, Kakashi scratched his head. No matter what, he couldn't have imagined that this Yusha came to him to talk about business, and it was hundreds of millions. All the shares of Konoha newspaper, this is a real 200 million. You know, his head on the black market is only 60 million taels. As soon as his thoughts returned, Kakashi's eyes opened and closed, and he also recovered. After all, he had also seen the world. In contrast, he was more curious about why Yusha wanted him to take a stake. Kakashi likes cooler barley tea, and when he enters it, the rich aroma of tea slowly spreads among his taste buds, and he looks at Yusha and asks suspiciously, "Actually, what I'm more curious about is, how did you come up with the idea of pulling me into the shares? If you can get 40 million taels in 10 days, you should be able to get 200 million taels in a few days." Maruzendo should have considered promoting Konoha love story to the entire 5 countries, right? When the time comes, you'll earn more than 200 million taels. Speaking of this, Kakashi paused, his clenched 10 fingers relaxed slightly, and then said, "What's more, 200 million taels is such a big sum of money, not everyone can take it. Even if there are big businessmen who can contribute 200 million taels, they will not suddenly invest in industries that they are not familiar with, so you can wait, there is no need to pull others into the shares." Quote. Yes, Kakashi is right, Yunata can wait. When he went to Maruzendo a few days ago to deliver the manuscript of Chapter 6, Momoko had already told him that after the 11th chapter of Konoha love story was over, she planned to increase her investment and go to the 5 major countries to sell it. However, Yusha also has her own reasons. Looking at Kakashi's somewhat puzzled eyes, Yusha smiled and said, "It's good to enjoy the shade with your back against the mountains. I can be regarded as unfamiliar with the place in Konoha village. If you pull a few prestigious people in the village to join the Konoha newspaper company, it will be tenable and save a lot of trouble. So ever since I had the idea to buy the newspaper, the first thing that came to mind was you, Copy Ninja Kakashi." This sounded quite reasonable. Kakashi loosened his strength, half leaning on the sofa. He was persuaded, looked at Yusha and said, "In that case, then I'll invest 30 million taels." As a member of the original Dark Department of Konoha Village and an elite shinobi, Kakashi received more than just 30 million taels for his missions. But most of his money was donated to the welfare house, and many ninjas in Konoha village were like him. And the last Nine-Tailed Fox Rebellion, which destroyed nearly half of Konoha village. In order to support the reconstruction of the village, many ninjas used their savings to support, and Kakashi also donated a lot at that time. Similarly, some ninjas who have lost their lives or are injured for the sake of their mission and can no longer be outside the ninja will also offer condolences to their families and give them some sympathy. Kakashi was withdrawn from the deaths of his father, teacher, Obito, and Rin, but he was happy to spend his money in this way. After all, there really wasn't much place he could use it. In fact, Kakashi still has 50 million taels of savings at present, but he can't invest all of them in Unatsu. After all, he has to save some money for emergencies. 30 million taels is okay, thank you Kakashi-senpai. Yusha is still quite satisfied with this result. After all, the friendship between the two is the last time they went on a mission together. Stopping Kakashi from going to help him make a second cup of barley tea, Unatsu immediately moves towards his second goal, Kai, after talking about him. Not surprisingly, Kai wasn't home at all. Yusha found Kai at the training ground, when he was doing physical training with Shaoli, and the two of them were doing push-ups with youthful enthusiasm. After understanding Yuna's thoughts, Kai nodded thoughtfully while doing push-ups, and asked Unatsu who was squatting beside him. Kakashi invested 30 million taels. That's right, Yusha nodded, and said with a smile, so, should brother Kai consider also investing in shares? Of course. Kai Meng raised his head, and then maintained the posture of propping up. Sweat fell to the ground like rain, and he said very enthusiastically, only by making more money can we help more people. However, this time I may have to sleep and lose to Kakashi, alas. I feel inexplicably unhappy. Yusha looked puzzled. Most of my money has been donated to people in need in the past few years, so I can only contribute 15 million taels, which is less than half of Kakashi. Kai shook his watermelon head and said. Yusha was speechless. It turned out to be this loss. After getting Kai again, Yusha decisively went to Hongdu's house. After the last time he invited her to dinner, he learned the address of Hongdu's house when he sent someone home. The red bean who was sitting on the sofa eating the three-color balls blinked her eyes, and she understood what he meant after listening to Yusha halfway through what she said, and filled the last balls into her mouth, and after she swallowed it, she decisively interrupted Yusha and said, "Stop, don't say it. Isn't it money? I still have more than 50 million taels in total. You take 50 million taels, just give me the rest of the fraction. Anyway, I basically don't have much money to spend." Quote. After finishing speaking, Hongdu picked up the washed red apple on the coffee table in a chic manner, took a bite of it, squinted his eyes slightly, and enjoyed eating it very much. Opened his mouth for 50 million taels, almost all of his net worth. Yusha was directly stunned by Hongdu's boldness and local tyrants. He opened his mouth and asked, "Sister Hongdu, are you so rich?" Unatsu was very curious. After all, Azuki is just a special shinobi, and she does much less tasks than Kakashi and the two elite shinobi, and he seriously suspects that she is an invisible little rich woman. After taking another bite of the apple, the red bean puffed out his cheeks and said inarticulately, "After the death of Okazen and Odosen, I began to prepare a dowry for myself, and I have saved it for many years." True so. The corners of Yusha's mouth twitched, and suddenly there was some Alexander. It seems that he must make a name for himself in Konoha newspaper, otherwise how can he be worthy of the dowry of red beans? So far, Yusha himself has 40 million taels, Kakashi has invested 30 million taels, Kai has 15 million taels, and the red bean side is 50 million taels, a total of 135 million taels, and there are 65 million taels from 200 million taels. Throwing the apple core into the trash, Hongdu wiped his hands and said, "By the way, what are you going to do with the rest of the money?" There is still a difference of 65 million taels, which is not a small amount. Yusha had already thought about it, and the rest of the money could be borrowed from Konoha Money Village, but after telling Hongdu about this solution, she immediately vetoed it. Chapter 56. Hongdu shook her head. Her eyes were as clear water, she held her chin with her hand, and said with a serious face, "The boss of the money bank is not a good thing. The interest rate is high, it is better not to go to the money bank." "Is it that serious?" Yusha raised his eyebrows in surprise. Since Qianzhuang can open in Konoha village, it shouldn't be so dark, right? "It's so serious." Hongdu shrugged his shoulders and explained with a flat face. "There is only a money village in the village, and the boss is a black-hearted tiger. As long as you borrow more money, then the more interest you have to pay. If you have to borrow 65 million taels at once, who knows how high the interest will be set by the boss. Moreover, even if it is Konoha Chenjuang, it will hurt the muscles and bones if it takes out 65 million taels at once." Quote, "The strength and function of the bank cannot be compared with that of a modern bank." Yusha understood. This money bank borrowed money. To put it bluntly, it was just a loan shark, in order to make a profit. Fortunately, he chatted with Hongdu in advance. Hongdu saw Yusha's expression and knew that he had dispelled his thoughts, so he continued to add, "Moreover, if you want to borrow 65 million taels, you don't have anything of the same value to mortgage, and Qianzhuang will definitely not lend you a little kid." After dispelling the idea of going to the money bank to borrow money, Yusha told Hongdu to go to Momoko to discuss a solution and left her house. He had already thought of a good way. After leaving the Red Bean's house, he planned to go straight to his destination, the residence of Boss Peaches in Konoha village, and planned to talk to the boss about the Konoha newspaper office. However, Yusha had just walked 500 meters when he suddenly stopped, feeling that something was wrong. The boss estimated that his status was not low. There must be a samurai stationed in front of the residence, and his body was a child. If he went directly to the door, it was estimated that he would not even be able to see him, and he would be turned away directly. It was a little thoughtless before. Yusha touched his chin, turned around and walked in the direction of Maruzendo. He could ask Momoko to help build a line. For being visited twice in one day, Momoko said that she admired Yusha's execution. Raising Qianshin's thin hand to hide the broken hair in her ear, she smiled softly at Yusha, who was sitting opposite, and said, "What's the matter, do you have anything else?" Yusha said straight to the point, "It's the incident at the Konoha newspaper, and the purpose of my visit is to help me build a line. I have 100 million taels on hand now. See if I can pay 100 million taels in advance, and the remaining 100 million will be paid off according to 20 million taels per month." That's right, the method that Yusha came up with is to pay in installments. Now he only has 135 million taels on hand, but it's really not appropriate for him to give it all to that boss, and like Kakashi, he has to leave the money for emergencies. If you run a newspaper, you have to pay for workers' wages, printing, propaganda, etc. Momoko looked at Yusha with a surprised expression, but he didn't expect that in less than a day, he had already raised 100 million taels in cash. She thought for a moment, then said cheerfully, "Okay. Then I'll go and report to the boss about your situation after work." Quote, "Then Sister Lao Taozi bother, if your boss has no problem there, you can meet tomorrow to sign the contract." Momoko nodded and said, "You are really capable, you can make up enough 100 million taels in one day. Okay, then you can come back to me tomorrow, and I'll talk to the boss when I get off work in a while." Quote, "If you want to put a whole 100 million yuan in a box, at least a few of them," and Yusha boasts that she can't take it. Fortunately, the ninja shop sells the kind of sealing scrolls for storage, and the next day he came directly to find Peaches with a scroll. When the office door opened, Momoko looked up and saw that it was Yunatsu. In order to prepare for today's meeting, Yusha also changed into a more formal set of clothes, and she couldn't help but laugh out loud as she stared. "Looks like you're wearing this dress for nothing." Momoko shook her head, pretending to be sorry, intending to tease Yunatsu. When Yusha heard this, the whole person was also slightly stunned, and said with a little disappointment, "Didn't it work?" Closing the door casually, Yusha frowned and began to think, if it didn't work out, the other party would probably have come out of the predicament and no longer need funds so much, not to the point of exhaustion, so naturally he didn't want to sell the Konoha newspaper again, that business that can be monopolized, no matter how bad the operation is, it is also a sure profit. Touching his chin, Yusha sighed, looking like he had to think about it again. Ha ha ha. Peach covered her lips with her slender hand, and she was about to lie on the table with a smile. Since she met Yusha, he has always been confident, and it was the first time I saw him frowning, like a little adult. The corners of Yusha's mouth twitched, and from the moment he heard Momoko's laughter twitch, he knew that he had been tricked, and he felt like a fool, and he believed it. Sister Peach, don't laugh yet, talk to me about what's going on, okay? Yusha took a deep breath and sat down across from Peaches and said. Well. Ha ha. Momoko held back a smile, straightened up, wiped away the tears from laughter with her fingers, and directly handed the 4 documents printed on the table to the person opposite, and said, the boss has had a lot of things lately, and he can't pull it out. This is the property right transfer letter of the Konoha newspaper, and the contract. You can give me the money after you sign it. After taking the 4 documents, Yusha didn't pay attention to the Peaches who continued to laugh. He began to carefully read the contract and the transfer letter, and after making sure that there was no problem, he waved his pen and signed his name very chicly. Left a contract, a letter of transfer, and the remaining 2 copies were handed to Momoko, who had laughed enough, along with the sealing scroll, and Yusha said, there are 100 million taels in this scroll, you take it, there should be a female ninja next to your boss, right? This is the simplest seal scroll that can be opened by an ordinary ninja. Quote. Momoko took it, glanced at what she was holding, and set it aside. Now that the matter has been settled, Yusha and Momoko exchanged a few more polite words, and then got up and left, planning to ask Kazuki, Kakashi, and Kai to have a meal and discuss the issue of sharing. The ancient tea bureau, the box on the 3rd floor is elegant and exquisite, but it is very much in line with today's Yusha's dress. Kai, as usual, is dressed in a green training suit. Azuki and Kakashi wore regular clothes. Yusha said straight to the point. Before I asked you to meet, I just came out of Momoko, and the affairs of the Konoha newspaper have been completed. The main reason for the dinner appointment is to talk to you about the sharing. I think so. Sister Azuki contributed 50 million taels, Kakashi's predecessors contributed 30 million taels, Brother Kai 15 million taels, and I 100 million taels and 500 million taels. Then we will divide it according to the proportion, 25% of Azuki beans, 15% of Kakashi, 7.5% of Kai, and 52.5% of me. What do you think? Kakashi knocked on the table, squinted slightly, and said with a smile, Yuna, I'm afraid you forgot that you still have to run it, right? In this way, if you come proportionally, you will lose. Chapter 57. Yes. Kai also shook his head, and said disapprovingly, a few of us adults, no matter what you say, we can't let you suffer, let's look like a way of sharing again. Hongdu also means this, the 3 of us don't know anything about business, and the rest depends on you, and you should take a little more. Quote. Looking at the serious eyes of the 3 people, Yusha couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The ninja world is really simple and simple. Or, in other words, the characters of Azuki, Kakashi, and Kai really don't care about the amount of money. With such a large investment, if it were someone else, it would definitely be a bloody blow because of this. Coughing for a moment, Yusha planned to push back, glanced at the 3 of them, and then said sincerely, Kakashi seniors, Big Brother Kai, and Sister Azubi, the 3 of you are figures with heads and faces in Konoha village, and when you were pulled into the shares, it was already an intangible property and it will be easy to do things in the future. How can I take more? Say yes. After saying this, Yusha paused slightly, touched his head, and continued with some embarrassment, on the contrary, my division just now is a little inappropriate, you should take more shares. In the face of Yunatsu's invisible touting, Kakashi, Azuki, and Kai are slightly overwhelmed. Although the 3 of them are not the kind of people who chase fame and fortune, but Yusha's words invisibly poke people's hearts, which is really comfortable, and the 3 of them are a little fluttery for a while. And as Yusha's characters with a head and a face in their mouths, they naturally can't be too calculating and stingy. Kakashi was the first to speak. Yuna, I think it's appropriate for you to take a little more, it's still you who take the lead. I think Kakashi is right. Kai slapped the table, clenched his fists, his eyes were about to fill with tears, and he said to Yusha excitedly, you take a little more, it is not harmful to a few of us, listen to Brother Kai's words, it must be right. Azuki nodded in agreement. No, no, no. Yusha hurriedly waved his hand, looking sincerely frightened, and said, the three of them are all seniors, so they should have a little more to do. All of a sudden, this dinner inexplicably became very polite, and no one really could convince anyone. During the conversation, the delicacies on the store were about to be cold, and a few people had no time to eat a bite. Red beans are an acute child, and it is annoying to listen to it, obviously saying that it is good to come out to eat, but now there is nothing in the stomach, and he slapped the table violently, making a bang sound, and the plates on the table shook. Waved his hand impatiently, and Hongdu said decisively, the three of you still haven't eaten. Let's follow the first method of sharing that Yusha said, I'm going to starve to death. The three men immediately nodded in agreement, and no one wanted to continue this stalemate. The Ancient Tea Bureau is a famous tea house on this side of Konoha Commercial Street, and the food is also good. After a few people are full, they plan to go to the Konoha newspaper office to have a look, which is considered a simple walk. Because in addition to doing tasks and not being in the village, Kai spent the rest of his time doing special training, and the streets and alleys of the entire Konoha village had left this green figure, and among the four people, he was the most familiar with the structure of Konoha village, so he led the way in front. If it weren't for Azuki and Yusha pulling Kai, he would still want to have a battle between men with Kakashi. The Konoha newspaper is different from the printing factory, such as Maruzendo and Iwanami Shoten, and it will not disturb the people by working overtime, and there is only one newspaper in the entire Konoha village, which is considered official, so the location is in the center of the village, not far from the Ancient Tea Bureau. The four of them were very consistent in their useless use of chakra, walking along the street to the Konoha newspaper office. Along the way, there are fallen leaves that have drifted away, and there is a little more autumn. Kai walked in front, and after nearly half an hour, he happened to come to an intersection. He stopped, pointed to the right front and said, oh, it's already here, that's the Konoha newspaper. Yusha looked in the direction of Kai and saw a two-story building, which was nothing unusual from the outside, except for the sign with the words, Konoha newspaper, hanging on the door of the first floor. Ryosuke Yamada, the editor-in-chief of the Konoha newspaper, is now staring at the notice in his hand with a sad face, which was sent from above not long ago. The Konoha newspaper has changed hands. The original chairman had a big problem with his funds, so he sold their newspaper, and the new boss was called Yusha. To be honest, after so many years of rolling around in the press, he has never heard of this person. He almost has the name of the rich man of the entire Fire Country. It's Yusha, he doesn't know anything. Just as Ryosuke Yamada was about to get up and ask the reporters under him to find out who Yusha was, there was a sudden knock on the door. President, Lord Hagiki, Lord Maidkai, Lord Mitarai, and Lord Yunatsu have something to visit you. A deep voice came from outside the door, it was his assistant. Ryosuke Yamada gasped, not because the three famous shinobi in the village came to him, but the name, Yusha. He immediately got up, ran to the door in 3 steps and 2 steps, opened the door himself, and said, "For adults, please come in." The assistant was surprised that the editor-in-chief had come to open the door in person, but when he thought of the status of Kakashi, Kai, and Azuki being behind him in the village, he also slightly understood. He gave way to the way, and then silently retreated. After Yuna, Kakashi, Azuki, and Kai walked into the office in turn, Ryosuke Yamada quickly closed the door and stood in front of several people with an embarrassed expression. He knew Kakashi, Kai, and Azuki Bean, but he hadn't seen this, Yusha. The corners of his mouth twitched. Ryosuke Yamada looked at the cute, little man, among the 4 people with some confusion, and he said in disbelief, "You. Hello. Excuse me, are you Yusha-sama?" Right. Yusha nodded, handed the contract he brought with him, the Konoha newspaper property rights transfer form, to Yamada Ryosuke, and said, "The Konoha newspaper has been resold to the four of us, so we are currently the owners of the Konoha newspaper." Quote. At this moment, Yusha also explained to Ryosuke Yamada the identities of Kakashi, Azuki, and Kai. Tremblingly took over the two documents. Ryosuke Yamada quickly swept through them, and finally accepted the fact that Yusha was just a child. He hurriedly returned the document to Yusha with both hands, and bowed and shouted, "Hello Yusha-sama, Kimu-sama, Maidkai-sama, and Hongdu-sama. I'm the editor-in-chief of Konoha newspaper, Ryosuke Yamada." Chapter 58. Although Yusha is just a child, the notice he received today clearly reads, President, Yusha. Although the other three people have a big position in Konoha village, they are only shareholders of dividends. Yusha is his top boss. Ryosuke Yamada meditated hard and didn't know who Yusha was, but he could let the three shinobi of Konoha village follow. The status must be special, and the old fritter was very good at doing things. Even if the other party was just a child, he would respectfully talk about the others first. Ryosuke Yamada, who straightened up, unconsciously broke out in a cold sweat because of nervousness. He pursed his lips, looked at the four in front of him and said, "President, are the four of you here to inspect today?" "I can't talk about the inspection. I just came to the newspaper office to take a look. Yamada, can you help me introduce it?" Yusha said with a smile. Today, he just came to take a look, and when he went back, he would consider the development plan of the newspaper. "The four adults come with me, and I'll take you to get to know the newspaper." President Yamada hurriedly opened the door for the four of them, leading the way in front as if explaining. The Konoha newspaper office is divided into 5 floors, and the first floor is an exhibition hall for the development history of the newspaper, which is mostly commemorative furnishings and the like, and only a few staff members are in charge, and 2 of them are the front desk. The second floor is the core of the news work of the entire newspaper, and the 3 departments of editor, reporter, editor, and design and typesetting are on this floor, which is also the first floor with the largest number of people. As for the third floor, there are the personnel of the finance department, the advertising department, and the planning department, while the fourth floor is the meeting room, the offices of several important leaders of the newspaper, and there is a small conference room in the innermost, and the president's office is also here, but the predecessor has basically never appeared, so the office is still brand new. The 5th floor is still empty, and some miscellaneous items are usually piled up. Ryosuke Yamada walked around Yusha and introduced the structure of the entire 5-story Konoha newspaper office. When Yusha listened to Ryosuke Yamada say that the 5th floor was empty, his eyes rolled and an idea came to mind. The group came to the press department. Yamada Ryosuke stepped forward to push open the door, made a gesture to a few people to invite in, and waited for the 4 of Yusha to go in. He took the door and walked in, and began to say, "This is our press department, usually responsible for collecting news and writing scripts, and it is the main force of our entire Konoha newspaper. There are currently 30 people." Smack. Ryosuke Yamada suddenly clapped his hands and said loudly, "This is our new president, Yusha-sama." The reporters who were originally in the office were nervous when they heard the voice of editor-in-chief Yamada from afar, but after pushing the door in, they saw 4 people coming in first, and the president was behind. Kakashi, Azuki, and Kai were all familiar to them, and only Yunatsu, who was walking in the front, didn't know anyone. But the basic people who do the news are all human spirits, and they all know that the one in front must have an identity, and when they heard that it was the new president, they all stood up directly, bowed and shouted, "Good president." The corners of Kakashi's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but touch the tip of his nose and said, "This is too exaggerated, isn't it?" "It's an exaggeration." Kai nodded, slightly surprised that the people in the press department had made such a big battle. Yusha glanced around unhurriedly. This office is very modern, there are several computers, and each camera is equipped with one, and it looks like a very high configuration. However, only half of the 30 workstations were full. "Hello." Yusha raised her hand and said hello with a smile. Hongdu blinked a little strangely after reading it, and couldn't help asking, Editor-in-Chief Yamada, is there someone who didn't go to work? Why is it that the press department is not even half-staffed? Editor-in-Chief Yamada bowed his head slightly and patiently explained, it's because half of them went out to gather news, so they are not in the office. Immediately afterwards, Ryosuke Yamada introduced the identities of Kakashi, Azuki, and Kai to everyone again. It took an hour for the group to visit the Konoha newspaper office. After Yusha came out of the newspaper office, he saw that the sun was still hanging in the sky, so he said to the three of them, "Can I ask you for one thing?" Hongdu squatted down, her eyes narrowed slightly. It was a beautiful crescent moon, and she said enthusiastically, "What's the matter?" "Let's hear it." Quote, "I want to join Konoha village and settle down directly in the future. Can you help me make a guarantee?" Yusha said. When it comes to joining Konoha village directly, Yusha has also thought about it for a long time. In fact, in the world of the Hokage, he used to be adrift and had no roots, but now it's different. He has a Konoha newspaper office, and he knows so many people from Konoha village, so he simply settles down, and it can be more convenient to do things, so that he can save a high commission for later tasks, and he can't take on high-level tasks. But if a wandering ninja wants to settle in Konoha village, he needs to report to the Hokage and accept long-term supervision and inspection, and before that, he has to pay 300,000 taels a month regularly. But if someone makes a guarantee, it's different. Kakashi, Kai, and Azuki are all the mainstays of Konoha village, and if they can get the guarantee of the three of them, it is estimated that they will not have to go through so many processes, and they can save a lot of money. Hongdu licked the back of his hand, stood up with his hands on his waist, and said, "Hey, what a big deal you thought it was. Isn't it just a guarantee? We'll accompany you to the Hokage." Quote. Kakashi also nodded and said, "It's just a guarantee, it's definitely no problem." Kai jumped up directly and asked excitedly, "Yusha, are you going to join Konoha?" Yusha nodded, looked at Kai, who seemed to be more excited than himself with his fists clenched, and said, "Just stay in Konoha. Even the Konoha newspaper office has been bought, where else can I run?" Roar. That's great. Kai waved his fist excitedly again, there was a feeling of tears in his eyes, he made exaggerated movements, and said, "Konoha's blood is constantly replenished, this may also be her charm." Yusha. In the Hokage building, after listening carefully to Yusha's intentions, the three generations nodded, got up and took out a file from the bookcase on the right, then took out 2 blank files, handed them to Yusha, and said gently, "Since there are Kakashi, Kai, and Azuki beans as guarantees, then the assessment period will be waived. Fill in this file card, and then go to the first floor to pay a resident fee of 1 million taels. As for the ninja part, although you didn't graduate from a ninja school, but through the last time Kakashi and the three of them dared to take you out on a mission, at least it had to be a shinobi, right?" Yusha took the 2 file cards, glanced at them twice, and said, "Yes, my current strength is shinobi." "Where is shinobi?" Kakashi muttered inwardly, but several people kept silent about Yunatsu's abilities. The third generation laughed twice, patted Yunatsu's shoulder, and said, "Then let Kakashi take you directly to register for the shinobi. If you want to become a shinobi, you need to go through the shinobi exam. Looking forward to your growth." Chapter 59. Okay, it's troublesome for 3 generations of grandpa. Yusha met the gaze of the 3 generations of Hokage and said leisurely. After returning to his seat and sitting down, he raised his head, and the 3 generations of Hokage glanced at Kakashi, Azuki, and Kai, and then instructed, "Since Yusha is jointly guaranteed by the 3 of you, then if he has any difficulties in the village in the future, you remember to help more." The 3rd generation Hokage can be said to be a very nagging old man. If it weren't for an emergency, he could pull you to talk for a long time. Azuki's temper was a little irritable, and after the 3 generations of Hokage repeated 10 times to take care of Yunatsu, she couldn't hold back any longer, stepped forward and slapped the table, and said, okay, a few of us know. 3 generations, if nothing else, we retreated." The 3 generations who were angry hurriedly said, it's okay, hurry up and pay the money on the first floor." The village's recent financial income has been a bit sluggish. After coming out of the Hokage's office, the three Kakashi led Yusha to quickly handle all the formalities, and he got a resident certificate of the Land of Fire Konoha village, along with a shinobi forehead guard, and a ninja bag, which contained 2 kunai, 5 darts, a flare, and an explosion charm. The corners of his mouth twitched. Yusha took the 3 things in his hand in disbelief, and couldn't help but complain wildly in his heart. If you want to say black, Konoha village is the blackest. A whole million taels, a symbolic gift of these things. The time of the day passed quickly, but it took a few big things in Yusha's heart. Downstairs in the Hokage, the 4 of them went home, and at this point, no one had the energy to drink another pot of wine. After Yusha returned to his house, he decisively used the doppelganger technique, and in an instant the room became crowded, and he ordered the 4 doppelgangers, "Hurry up and pack up, and move to the Konoha newspaper office tonight." Today, when Ryosuke Yamada talked about the fact that the 5th floor of the Konoha newspaper office was empty, he had already thought about it. Now that he has a resident card in Konoha village, he still has to find a place to live for a long time. Renting a house is not a long-term solution. Before leaving the Konoha newspaper office, Yusha mentioned it to Ryosuke Yamada, and he immediately said that he would find someone to arrange it, and he could move there in the evening. After all, living here is too far away from the Konoha newspaper office, and it is not very convenient. Although he has been here for more than 3 months, there are not enough things to exaggerate, and it was completed in an hour, with a total of 4 pieces of luggage, and exactly 4 doppelgangers are carrying each of them in the direction of the Konoha newspaper office. Yusha waited until the clone had moved everything. He closed the door without hurrying, and then went downstairs and knocked on the door of the owner on the 1st floor. The owner of the house is a grandmother in her 50s, who came to open the door in good spirits, and saw that it was Yusha, and the folds on her face were about to smile and bloom. She said, "Yusha, come in and sit." "No." Yusha touched her head, handed the key to Grandma, and said, "Granny Ryoko, I have a house, and I'm going to move in tonight. Now I'll say goodbye to you." Yusha smiled and said, "Granny Ryoko, I'm in Konoha village anyway, and I'll come back to see you when I'm free." After chatting with Ryoko's mother-in-law for a few more words, she politely declined the invitation to stay for a meal, and Yusha immediately ran towards the Konoha newspaper office. The Konoha newspaper office is located in the most prosperous area of the entire village, and even if it is 7 o'clock in the evening, it is full of people and bright lights. When Yusha arrived, Ryosuke Yamada was waiting at the door of the 1st floor, not in a hurry, without the slightest hint of impatience. Ryosuke Yamada spotted Yusha not far away, and immediately stepped forward to bow and say hello, and several doormen, front desk, and staff also bowed. Yusha nodded, walked over to Ryosuke Yamada's side and said, "My doppelganger helped me move just now. Has it already arrived?" "I'm here, I'll take you up and have a look," Ryosuke Yamada said. I have to say that Ryosuke Yamada is a person who can figure out people's minds and stand firm in the workplace. Yusha's room is arranged in the 2nd room on the 5th floor, although the layout is simple, but the price is not low. All of them are newly purchased. Moreover, the entire 5th floor does not show that it is a pile of debris, clean and tidy. Ryosuke Yamada lowered his head and looked at Yunatsu's expression, seeing that he nodded with satisfaction, before asking softly, "What is still missing, the president?" "I'll send it to you early tomorrow morning." Quote, "You're bothered, that's it." Yusha was very satisfied, and then closed the door and said to Ryosuke Yamada beside him, "Let's go, take me to see the newspaper's financial statements." The president's office was also cleaned up, and after Ryosuke Yamada sent the financial statements over, Yusha chatted with him for a few words and let him get off work. After all, it wasn't too early. Konoha newspaper reviews sell about 60,000 copies a day, and after deducting costs, the daily profit will roughly hover around 120,000 taels. In this way, the monthly profit will be about 3 million to 4 million, that is to say, the 200 million taels invested at the beginning can be fully recouped in 4 to 5 years at most, which is still in the case of Yusha not interfering in business management. Outside the window was the lights of thousands of homes, and after reading all the financial statements of the past year, Yaxia squinted slightly and began to rub his temples. After almost understanding the finances of Konoha newspaper, his next step was to think about how to make Konoha newspaper good and bigger. There were several oversized wooden shelves in Yusha's office for previous editions, and he walked over to pick up all the newspapers for the month and began to flip through them on his desk. The newspapers of Konoha newspaper are all daily newspapers, with 2 sheets per page, divided into 4 columns. The first column, which mainly publishes local news, is all about things that happened in Hokage village. If there is really no major news on this day, I will also write some trivial things to fill in, and this column has the most content, and it takes up a piece of paper. The second column is written about the recent regulations issued by the Fire Nation and Konoha and so on, but this can't be every day, so the official notice published each time has to be changed every few weeks at the shortest, and this column only occupies a tofu block. As for the third column, it is the affairs of some small towns near Konoha village, and it is also the second main force of the newspaper, which can occupy half of the paper. And then there's the fourth column. Yusha rubbed her temples with a headache. This piece is written about other countries, but because of the inconvenient transportation, so some of the news is already a month ago, completely lost the timeliness of the news. Chapter 60. With such a newspaper still having a return rate of more than 20% every year, Yusha couldn't help but sigh again. It is worthy of a monopoly business, and other industries have to lose their pants like this. After almost going through all the newspapers in the past half a month, Yusha noticed one point: each Konoha daily newspaper has a fixed layout, and it doesn't even have the most common form of advertising in modern newspapers. Knocking on the table, Yusha couldn't help but think. If a newspaper is well run, then the advertising space can really occupy a piece of space, and the income is not cheap. A world-famous newspaper like the New York Times spends up to 70% of its total revenue on advertising. As the only newspaper in Konoha village, Konoha Daily will definitely come to the door if there are no competitors, if the advertising space is opened. As long as he can make reasonable use of advertising, he believes that profits will soon be doubled. However, Yusha has no plans to open advertising space immediately. After all, this needs to be taken into account and can be put aside for the time being. The most important thing now is to change the content of the Konoha Daily, not to mention the old-fashioned and rigid layout design, and there is still a bit of indiscriminate meaning. The first column and the third column can be combined, and in recent years, Konoha village and even several surrounding towns have been relatively peaceful, and there are few major events and big news. And the most excessive thing is that sometimes what happens in one day can be deliberately divided into 2 days after it happens, such as drunkards making trouble and thieves being caught on one day. But today's news is enough, and I am afraid that tomorrow's news will not be enough, so I will leave one to write tomorrow. There are more reports of trivial things like goosebumps, and yesterday's Konoha Daily published some boring news such as conflicts between young couples, which is actually an act of making up the word count in order to fill these 2 newspapers. If it weren't for the fact that the villagers of Konoha village had few ways to entertain themselves, and the distribution of newspapers was a monopoly, Yusha felt that with this shoddy Konoha Daily, the sales volume was estimated to have fallen below 10,000 copies. Since the first column and the third column are all local news, they can be completely integrated, and then it is enough to give a piece of paper to the layout. After all, the news is more expensive than more, and it is a waste of manpower, material and financial resources to put meaningless, discussed, and explosive news. If you want to publish news, you need to publish the kind that is more eye-catching. Yusha got up and poured himself a glass of water, loosened his neck before sitting down again. Staring at the rising heat, he picked up the pen and continued to write the next changes. As for the second column, he has already thought about it, the commercial version. In the new business edition, you can publish some business-related news and news. Konoha village is so big, there are many merchants, and there are many successful businessmen in the land of fire, and you can also do character albums and merchant albums, in this section, so that the villagers can better understand the business situation of Konoha village. This section, which previously promulgated the regulations and policies of Konoha village and the Land of Fire, is also integrated into the second column. If there are new regulations or policies, they will be specially published, and if there are none, commercial information will be published. In this way, there is no need to hang a policy or regulation on the Konoha Daily for half a month like before. Unless there are special circumstances, regulations issued on the same day can only be published on the same day. Only by making reasonable use of resources can you make a fortune. When he wrote the third column, in his notebook, Yusha paused, which would be his most innovative page. The original third column was removed by Yusha, so he wanted to open a new one directly like the commercial version. Come to think of it, the story will be a good choice. He is now mainly writing for a living, and then he can directly make up some short stories and put them on it. In addition to the employees of the press department and the editorial department, it is estimated that they can also write. In addition, if a novel is serialized in a newspaper, some people who buy the first copy will naturally want to know the next plot if they are attracted to the novel or story, and in this case, sales will definitely increase steadily. In the case of the fourth column, it can't be operated the same as before anyway. It's really a problem to publish the news of the entire 5 major countries, but the news reported in the Konoha Daily is a month ago, isn't it a joke? Some ninjas get news even faster than they can from the newspapers. Yusha bit her nose and thought about it for a long time, but she didn't have any good ideas. Closing the notebook, he sighed and decided to put it away. After all, it's a long time coming, and you can't get anything done overnight, and you can't rush it. And for the rectification of Konoha newspaper, it is estimated that it will have to be done step by step. Although this plan is clearly written in the notebook, it is difficult to implement it alone, and it is estimated that many meetings will have to be organized at that time. Tasks also need to be reassigned, and the reporters who are mainly responsible for gathering news must be trained well, and they are the main force. If the reporter can't make the transformation, then the transformation of the entire Konoha newspaper will be even more difficult, so all this is urgent. Glancing up at the clock hanging on the wall, Yusha realized that it was still a few hours away from her usual sleeping time. Before, because I wanted to write Konoha love story, I was more inspired at night, so I usually went to bed very late, and it became a she. Now that Konoha love story has been written, Yusha has nothing to do and can't sleep. With her hands clenched into fists on her chin, Yusha prepares to write a new story in preparation for the story meeting section. There are many classics in his mind, but if he wants to turn into a fire, he has to be carefully selected. After thinking about it for a long time, Yusha suddenly raised his chin, picked up the pen and changed his notebook, turned the first page and wrote down 7 big characters. This killer is not too cold. The word cold just fell into the pen, and suddenly Yusha's stomach screamed. Grunt tilde. He was stunned for a while before he reacted. He was busy moving this afternoon, and after arriving at the newspaper office, he began to read the financial statements and write the change plan of the Konoha Daily, so he didn't have time to eat a bite of dinner yet. After thinking about it, Yusha decided to go out for a bite to eat. He put all the newspapers back in their place, and then locked the notebook and the like in the bookcase, and then he left to turn off the lights and close the door. After coming out of the office, Yusha went down to the second floor and suddenly found that there were still a few people on the second floor who had not left, even the editor-in-chief Yamada. Yusha gave them a strange look, then walked in and asked, "Why don't you get off work yet?"